Handel, Reisen, Forschen, Arbeiten. 500 Millionen Europäerinnen und Europäer leben heute zwischen Riga und Limassol, zwischen Athen und Lissabon in Wohlstand und Freiheit. Die Generation meiner Kinder kann sich ein Leben ohne dieses Heimatgefühl Europa gar nicht vorstellen. Als diese glückliche Generation geboren wurde, dachten auch wir Älteren, dass es immer so weiterginge. Heute ist auch den Letzten klar, dass wir wieder kämpfen müssen, dass wir aufstehen müssen für unser Europa. Die ganze Welt ist herausgefordert, mit disruptiven Entwicklungen umzugehen, die auch an Europa nicht vorbeigehen. Der demografische Wandel, die Globalisierung der Weltwirtschaft, die rasante Digitalisierung unserer Arbeitswelt und natürlich der Klimawandel. Keine dieser Metaentwicklungen
digitalization of our world of work and of course climate change. None of these meta in developments are
Sie
new.
wurden von der Wissenschaft lange vorausgesagt.
They have been predicted by our scientists for a long time.
Dass wir heute
But the
als
new
Bürgerinnen
thing
und
is that
Bürger
as
Europas,
citizens of
egal in
Europe
welchem Land
today,
wir wohnen,
irrespective
die
of which country we
Auswirkungen
live in,
konkret
the
erleben
impact of
und
that
spüren.
is something that we are feeling in our
Ob
daily
es die
lives.
finnischen Weizenbauer,
Whether
die durch die
it's
Dürre
the
betroffen
Finnish,
sind, ob es
wheat
die
growers
tödliche
affected
Hitzewelle
by
in Frankreich ist,
drought,
wir spüren
or
den
the
Klimawandel
effects that are
ganz
now
konkret.
made palpable in France. We are
Ob es
all
die Rentnerin in
experiencing
Irland
climate
ist, die mit
change.
Online-Banking umgehen muss,
Online banking
oder der
is
Arbeiter in
now
Polen,
in the daily
der sich nach
lives of the
20
Irish or
Jahren
in
im Job
Poland.
weiterbilden
People
muss,
after 20
überhaupt
years
seine
in the
Arbeit zu
workplace are
behalten.
having to
Wir
take further
spüren
training
die
just to remain in the
Digitalisierung
workplace. So
ganz
we are all
konkret.
feeling this
Ob es
very
Regionen in Europa
close
sind,
and
in denen
personal.
Schulen,
And
Krankenhäuser,
whether it's in the schools or
Betriebe
hospitals,
schließen müssen.
companies
Wir spüren
in
den
Europe which are having to
demografischen
close,
Wandel
we are experiencing
konkret.
demographic change as well.
All of this
Up
has
close
left
and personal.
people with a feeling of losing control, of losing ties with our communities. None of these challenges will go away. But there have been different ways to react to these trends. Some are turning towards authoritarian regimes. Some are buying their global influence and creating dependencies by investing in ports and roads. And others are turning towards protectionism. None of these options are for us. We want multilateralism. We want fair trade. We defend the rules-based order because we know it is better for all of us. We have to do it the European way. But if we are to go down the European path, we must first rediscover our unity. If we are united on the inside, nobody will divide us from the outside. If we close the gaps between us, we can turn tomorrow's challenges into tomorrow's opportunities. Honourable members, our most pressing challenge is keeping our planet healthy. This is the greatest responsibility and opportunity of our times. I want Europe to become the first climate-neutral continent in the world by 2050. To make this happen, we must take bold steps together. Our current goal of reducing our emissions by 40% by 2030 is not enough. We must go further. We must strive for more. A two-step approach is needed to reduce CO2 emissions by 2030 by 50, if not 55%. The European Union will lead international negotiations to increase the level of ambition of other major economies by 2021. Because to achieve real impact, we do not only have to be ambitious at home, we have to do that, yes, but the world has to move together. To make this happen, I will put forward a Green Deal for Europe in my first 100 days in office. I will put forward the first ever European climate law, which will set the 2050 target in law. This increase of ambition will need investment on a major scale. Public money will not be enough. I will propose a Sustainable Europe investment plan and turn parts of the European Investment Bank into a climate bank. This will unlock €1 trillion of investment over the next decade. It means change. All of us and every sector will have to contribute, from aviation to maritime transport to the way each and every one of us travels and lives. Emissions must have a price that changes our behaviour. To complete this work and to ensure our companies can compete on a level playing field, I will introduce a carbon border tax to avoid carbon leakage. But, honourable members, what is good for our planet must also be good for our people and our regions. Of course, I know about the importance of cohesion funds, but we need more. We need a just transition for all. Not all of our regions have the same starting point, but we all share the same destination. This is why I will propose a Just Transition Fund to support those most affected. This is the European way. We are ambitious, we leave nobody behind, and we offer perspectives. If we want to succeed with this ambitious plan, we need a strong economy. Because what we want to spend, we have to earn it first. For that, we need to strengthen the backbone of our economy, the small and medium-sized enterprises. They are innovative, they are entrepreneurial, they are flexible and agile, they create jobs, they provide vocational training to our youth. But they can only do all this if they have access to capital everywhere in this huge single market. Let's get rid of all the barriers. Let's open the door. Let's finally complete the Capital Markets Union. Our small and medium enterprises deserve it. And we need to work with the Stability and Growth Pact. Where investment and reforms are needed, we should make sure they can be done. We should make use of all the flexibility allowed in the rules. We are proud of our economy. We want to make it stronger, but there's also a clear and simple logic. It's not people that serve our economy. It's the economy that serves our people. In our social market economy, we must reconcile the market with the social. Therefore, I will refocus our European semester to make sure we stay on track with our sustainable development goals. And I will stand for fair taxes, whether for brick and mortar industries or digital business. When the tech giants are making huge profits in Europe, this is fine because we are an open market and we like competition. But if they are making these profits by benefiting from our education system, our skilled workers, our infrastructure, and our social security, if this is so, it is not acceptable that they make profits, but they are barely paying any taxes because they play our tax system. If they want to benefit, they have to share the burden. Honourable members, the European way is also about using all of our potential, our people, our talent, our diversity. It is about creating a fairer and more equal union. This will drive me forward every single day I am in office, as it has throughout my career. We have come a long way since I was a Minister for Family Affairs and had to fight to introduce parental pay or access to childcare for families. But the fight for fairness never stops. It is still too difficult for hard-working families to make ends meet in Europe. I want to ensure that work pays. In a social market economy, every person that is working full-time should earn a minimum wage that pays for a decent living. Therefore, we will develop a framework, of course in respect of the different labour markets. But I think the optimal option is to have collective bargaining by employers' union and trade union, because they tailor the minimum wage to the sector or to the region necessary. Of course, I'm aware there are different models, but we have to create the framework. And I want better protection for those who lose their job when our economy takes a severe hit. A European unemployment reinsurance scheme will support our economies and our people in times of external shocks. Of course, there are national unemployment insurances, but a reinsurance scheme for those heavy external shocks is needed in Europe. I also want more equality and fairness for our young people. Youth unemployment is at 14% in Europe, but it ranges from 5% to 40% in some countries. We cannot accept this. Young people have aspirations. They want to work. They want to have a future. And it is our job to let them achieve this. This is why I will make sure the Youth Guarantee, which I started when I was a Minister for Labour Affairs in our Council, is working as well as it can in every member state. And I will support the European Parliament's idea to triple the Erasmus budget as part of the next long-term budget. We have to care for the most vulnerable, our children. We have to fight poverty. I know, as a mother of 7, that it makes a difference for their entire life if children have access to education, to sport, to music, to healthy food, and to a loving environment. We need a child guarantee to help ensure that every child in Europe at risk of poverty and social exclusion has access to the most basics of rights, like healthcare and education. It will empower them, and it pays tremendously if we back them when they are young. And this is part of my action plan to bring our pillar of social rights to life. And I will start at home, by example. I will ensure full gender equality in my College of Commissioners. If member states do not propose enough female commissioners, I will not hesitate to ask for new names. Since 1958, there have been 183 commissioners. Only 35 were women. That is less than 20%. We represent half of our population. We want our fair share. we also need to talk openly about violence against women. If 1 in 5 women have already suffered physical or sexual violence in the European Union, and 55% of women have been sexually harassed, this is clearly not a women's issue. I will propose to add violence against women on the list of EU crimes defined in the treaty, and the European Union should join the Istanbul Convention. I'm convinced if we close those gaps between us, we will emerge stronger as a union. Honourable members, the cradle of our European civilization is Greek philosophy and Roman law. And our European continent went through its darkest period when we were ruled by dictators and rule of law was banished. For centuries, Europeans fought so hard for their liberty and independence. The rule of law is our best tool to defend these freedoms and to protect the most vulnerable in our union. This is why there can be no compromise when it comes to respecting the rule of law. There never will be. I will ensure that we use our full and comprehensive toolbox at European level. In addition, I fully support an EU-wide rule of law mechanism. And to be clear, the new instrument is not an alternative to the existing instruments, but an additional one. The Commission will always be independent guardian of the treaty. Lady Justice is blind. She will defend the rule of law wherever it is attacked. Honourable members, the rule of law is universal. It applies to all. In the last 5 years, more than 17,000 people have drowned in the Mediterranean, which has become one of the deadliest borders in the world. At sea, there is the duty to save lives. And in our treaties and conventions, there is the legal and moral duty to respect the dignity of every human being. The European Union can and must defend these values. The European Union needs humane borders. We must save. But saving alone is not enough. We must reduce irregular migration. We must fight smugglers and traffickers. It's organised crime. We must preserve the right to asylum and improve the situation of refugees, for example, through humanitarian corridors in close cooperation with the UNHCR. We need empathy and decisive action. I am aware of how difficult and divisive discussions on these issues are. We need to address the legitimate concerns of many and look at how we can overcome our differences. I will propose a new pact on migration and asylum, including the relaunch of the Dublin reform. This will allow us to return to a fully functioning Schengen area of free movement, the key driver of our prosperity, security and freedoms. A centrepiece in this ambition is a reinforced European Border and Coast Guard Agency. We need to reach a standing core of 10,000 Frontex border guards, not by 2027, but way earlier, at least by 2024. We have to modernise our asylum system. A common European asylum system must be exactly that, common. We can only have stable external borders if we give enough help to member states facing the most pressure because of where they are on the map. We need solidarity. We need to help each other and to contribute. We need a new way of burden sharing. And we must make a fair cooperation offer to countries of origin and transit, which are in the interest of both sides. Diplomacy, economic development, investment, stability and security are needed so that people have a perspective. I would like to tell you a story about perspective. 4 years ago, I was lucky enough to welcome a 19-year-old refugee from Syria into my home and into my family. He spoke no German. He was deeply scarred by his experience of civil war and flight. Today, 4 years later, he's fluent in German, he's fluent in English, he's of course fluent in Arabic. He is a community leader by day in vocational training and a student for his high school degree by night. He is an inspiration for us all. And one day, he wants to go home. And honourable members, as a defence minister, I've been many times in this war-torn neighbourhood. I will never forget the words of former President of Iraq, Massoum, who said, "We want to see more Europe here. The world is calling for more Europe. The world needs more Europe." I believe Europe should have a stronger and more united voice in the world, and it needs to act fast. And that is why we must have the courage to take foreign policy decisions by qualified majority and to stand united behind them. The cornerstone of our collective defence will always be NATO. We will stay transatlantic, and we have to become more European. This is why we created the European Defence Union. Our work for our European Union of security and defence is embedded in comprehensive security. Stabilisation always comes with diplomacy, reconciliation and reconstruction. Our servicemen and servicewomen work side by side with police officers, diplomats and development aid workers. And honourable members, these men and women deserve our utmost respect and recognition for their tireless service for Europe. I cannot talk about Europe without talking about our friends from the United Kingdom. For the very first time in 2016, a member state decided to leave the European Union. This is a serious decision. We regret it, but we respect it. Since then, together with the current government of the United Kingdom, the European Union has worked hard to organise the orderly departure of the United Kingdom. The withdrawal agreement concluded with the government of the United Kingdom provides certainty where Brexit created uncertainty, in preserving the rights of citizens and in preserving peace and stability on the island of Ireland. These two priorities are mine too. However, I stand ready for a further extension of the withdrawal date should more time be required for a good reason. In any case, the United Kingdom will remain our ally, our partner and our friend. Honourable members, when I came to Strasbourg 13 days ago, I promised I'd come to listen. I've heard your concerns, your hopes, your expectations. The political guidelines which I sent to you today reflect our discussions. From what I have heard, I've drawn my conclusions and I've made my decisions. First, I want European citizens to play a leading and active part in building the future of our Union. I want them to have their say at a conference on the future of Europe to start in 2020 and to run for 2 years. Second, I want us to work together to improve the Spitzenkandidat system. We need to make it more visible to a wider electorate, and we need to address the issue of transnational lists at the European elections as a complementary tool of European democracy. And third, yes, I support a right of initiative for the European Parliament. When this House, acting by a majority of its members, adopts resolutions requesting the Commission to submit legislative proposals, I commit to responding with a legislative act in full respect of the proportionality, subsidiarity and better lawmaking principles. I'm convinced that our stronger partnership will further help to make people's voices heard. Herr Präsident,
Mr. President,
mein Vater war 15 Jahre alt,
my father was 15
als der schaurige
years
Krieg
old when
durch den mein
violent
Land
war
Tod, Verwüstung,
that had brought
Vertreibung und
devastation
Zerstörung über
by
unseren
my
Kontinent
country
gebracht hat.
and displacement and destruction to our continent ended.
Hat seinen Kindern, mir und meinen 6
He
Geschwistern
often told
oft
his
davon
children,
erzählt.
me and my 6 siblings, about it. Above all, he told us how significant it had been that the other countries reached out a hand to us again to bring us into the circle of democratic peoples. He started in the coal and steel community and said at the outset, we're trading with each other again, and if we're trading, then friendships will grow up and friends will not shoot at each other. He was head of cabinet for the von der Groben in the Hallstein Commission and later Director General for competition issues. That is why I was born in Brussels and became European before later learning that I was German and a citizen of Lower Saxony. And that is why there is only one thing for me: to unify and strengthen Europe. Anyone who wishes to strengthen and help this Europe of ours to grow and blossom will find in me a passionate fighter by their side. But anyone who seeks to weaken, split or destroy its values will find in me a fierce opponent. In his old age, at the end of his life, my father's story about Europe had changed. He no longer talked about war so much. He said, Europe is like a long marriage. Love may not be greater than on the first day, but it gets deeper. Because we know that we can rely on each other in good times and in bad, because we know we can argue but be reconciled again, because we never forget why we formed this alliance. All of us in this room live in a Europe that has grown up, matured, and grown strong with its 500 million inhabitants. Over 200 million people voted in the European elections. This Europe has influence. This Europe wants to take responsibility for itself and this world. That's not always easy. I know it can be painful and difficult, but it is our most noble duty. People want to see that we deliver, that we make progress. Young people are calling for it. My children, quite rightly, are saying, don't waste time, do it. And that's what drives me. This is why I need your help and support. And I call on all Europeans, therefore, to play their part. It is the most precious thing that we have. Long live Europe. Vive l'Europe. Long live Europe. Thank you.
Grazie.
Thank you.
Grazie.
Thank you, Madam von der Leyen. Thank you for your statement. We now will hear from the group presidents, starting with Mr. Weber. Manfred, you have the floor.
Sehr geehrte Frau von der Leyen, sehr geehrte...
Thank you, President. Ms. von der Leyen, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, after the election of our President 2 weeks ago, the time has now come to elect the President of the European Commission. I'd like to thank Ursula von der Leyen for the ideas, suggestions she shared with us today about the future of Europe. For our group, my group, the EPP, we are committed to our electoral promise. The commitments we made to the citizens of Europe must guide our work. 40 million people voted for the 138 members of the EPP group. These 40 million citizens expect us to live up to our commitment. That's to say that the promises we made must be delivered on. A fair Europe with equitable living conditions for everybody. A fair Europe where we remain the laboratory of research for the world, further enhancing our position. A safe and sure Europe where we provide secure borders while at the same time helping those in need. An open Europe which trades with the rest of the world and conducts a partnership with Africa. A Europe which protects the environment and the climate while at the same time protecting the social consequences. Ursula von der Leyen is above all a Christian Democrat. She's a convinced European, which is one of the reasons why we will, together with her, be translating into reality our electoral promise, and we will be extending our full support to Ursula von der Leyen today. I would like to extend my thanks to Frank Timmermans, Bas Eickhout, Ska Keller and other members of this House for the determined campaigns they wage for the European Parliament. I was honoured to be one of those candidates with them in a fair competition in which we all tried to fight to defend our values and to convince people while at the same time respecting the results. 201 million people took part in the European elections. That's a genuine festival of democracy. And all of them shared one wish, which was to see a more democratic Europe. Developments in recent days haven't always comforted that belief amongst people. We've seen examples of egotism from political parties, and that's something which many people view as damaging for democracy. So what's happened over the last few days has caused damage. However, I don't think we can put that damage right by causing further damage. Europe must now be in a position to act. Europe must be stable. This is why 2 weeks ago my group supported the candidacy of David Sassoli as President of the European Parliament, And I expect today that his group and others will support our candidate for the presidency of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. I would like to reiterate, we have to be able to rely on each other. This is the only way that Europe can succeed. Obviously, over the next 5 years, we have to continue to work under the principle of a united Europe. We need to ensure that we have better scrutiny of the implementation of European law and an enhanced and consolidated system of Spitzenkandidaten. We have to ensure that deals cut in smoky back rooms are a thing of the past. This is why I and my group will fight with determination to ensure that we create a Europe for the people. For us as Christian Democrats, today must be a new start. We have to roll up our sleeves and get down to work with Ursula von der Leyen as President of the Commission. Thank you.
Presidente Weber.
Thank you, Mr. Weber. Mrs. Garcia Perez for the Socialist and Democrat Group.
Gracias, President.
Thank you, President. Madam von der Leyen, today is an important day. The future of the European Union is in our hands, and my political group, which has been there since the very beginning, has a pro-Europeanism in its veins and wants to help to build our Europe. We accept our responsibility towards the European citizens who put their trust in us, and that's why we will act responsibly. We want to be sure that over the coming 5 years, we will be able to continue to build a project and a sustainable future for all Europeans. I would just like to recall a pro-European on a day such as today, who took the floor in this Parliament 40 years ago, Willy Brandt. In the plenary just after the first direct elections in 1979, he launched an appeal, which I think we should recall today. He regretted the fact that democracy was moving so slowly in Europe. And he also regretted the fact that the European institutions still seem to be too distant from the people. However, members of the European Parliament were able to get down to work despite their geographical or ideological differences. They wanted to solve people's problems and to try to connect with young people. 40 years later, his words are as relevant as ever. We as socialists want to continue to ensure that we make faster progress with democracy in Europe. We had placed our faith in the Spitzenkandidat procedure and were in favour of transnational lists. However, European democracy can't go into reverse. We, Madam von der Leyen, want to ensure that we see the Spitzenkandidat process in 2024. Europe has to be able to solve people's problems. We have to be able to face up to the challenges we face today. And we need to ensure this is the case before we can support you for Commission President. We have to know that you will be possible to lead the change that citizens want, to bring about the transformation that young people are demanding. We think you're moving in the right direction. There are advances. Now, however, we need to see things be properly implemented. We want to see ambition in our legislation. We need to also set binding objectives to ensure that we can meet our objectives in cutting emissions by 2030. Nobody has to be left behind. And so this means that you have to ensure that we have a fund for a fair transition. We also want to see an investment plan for sustainable Europe. It has to be clear that a large part of this has to be done through public investment. When we set the European Sustainable Development Goals and the European Semester, these can't just be seen as a principle. We have to set out clear criteria and indicators. You can't punish those governments who are investing in an economic transformation which is supporting its people and which is laying the foundations for a sustainable future. Therefore, we will insist, and this is something that you set out in your letter, we want to see economic flexibility. and an unemployment guarantee. Europe has to take care of its most vulnerable citizens. That's why our political group will always support the European social pillar, and more specifically the child guarantee and the youth guarantee. Madam von der Leyen, we need to see a stronger stance against poverty in general. Everybody has to play their role in creating these policies. We also have to ensure that we make proper use of technological changes. You've said that you want there to be a shared effort. Have you come up with any specific figures on this? You also said that we have to improve the situation for workers from new platforms. Here you have a political group that would support a directive on these issues. Then when it comes to gender equality, I think we are on the same track. My political group has gender equality as a clear political priority. We want to have binding gender quotas. This is something that would be a very good start if you were to have gender equality within your Commission. We also want to see a new mechanism. I think a lot of people in this room would like to see that you plan to be as demanding as the previous Commission, and in particular as Frans Timmermans was when it comes to the rule of law. Perhaps you could explain exactly what you'll do there. We also want to see more solidarity between member states and also a reform of Dublin. We need more solidarity. We have to talk about humanitarian corridors. We can't just strengthen security or to strengthen Frontex objectives. We have to save people's lives. And in order to do that, we need to have some kind of rescue system which won't criminalise those who are involved in humanitarian rescue operations or those who are victim of circumstance. Madam von der Leyen, we're here to listen to you. We don't want any kind of institutional crisis which will just further delay the changes that Europe needs to see. But what we do want are guarantees that the coming years will ensure that Europe will be able to take the measures it needs to. My group will take its position this afternoon thinking about what's the best for Europe. The men and women of Europe want to regain their hope in the European project. And we, of course, want to build more and better Europe.
Grazie. Presidente Ciolo.
Thank you. Mr. Cholos, you have the floor.
Doamnă președintă desemnat, Parlament.
Mrs. von der Leyen, this Parliament has never before been so important and has been aware of the responsibility that is upon its shoulders. The Council that put your name forward is split. There is a global package. There is a compromise package that came about after much debate. And I think that it's a shame that the balance between East and West Europe hasn't been upheld. Obviously, if the College of Commissioners were to be better balanced, that would be a good thing. Now, you have been nominated, and it is because of the responsibilities that you have entered into. We want Europe to make progress, and we have high expectations after the elections. All European citizens wished to have a Spitzencandidate system to enable them to select and elect the next president of the Commission, but that hasn't happened. Now, you've talked about a conference for the future of Europe. This is going to make the democratization process possible, and we know exactly what's been going on. We've seen the pro-European groups in negotiation, and we have put together a common platform. In order for your election to go through, we do need a common working framework between Parliament and Commission with clear objectives set out for the following 5 years. And our group is prepared to support you if you are able to promise this renewal for Europe. The deal that you put forward today is a clear one, and the pro-Europeans will certainly be giving you their support, and we are able for European citizens to build a Europe that is able once again to garner support and faith. Before the elections, it was said that there's an awful lot of anti-Europeanism in this Parliament, and that's going to make it very difficult for Europe, but that hasn't proven to be the case. Pro-European forces in this House remain strong, and now the millions of Europeans that voted for us must not be disappointed. They expect of us that we will uphold the rule of law. We mustn't disappoint millions of young people that voted, and the appeal that you have made for the climate, for good cooperation between the generations, these are things that must go ahead, and we mustn't disappoint entrepreneurs and farmers. There must be this possibility for people to live in an open world in a way that is worthy of people, that is ecological, that moves forward, but it also takes into account new technologies and doesn't exclude digitalization. It is an important component and mustn't be limited. The single market mustn't just be a bureaucratic arrangement. It must make sure that well-being and wealth is spread. And we expect of you, Mrs. von der Leyen, that you will lead in a pro-European manner. Europe isn't just an administrative setup. It pursues a political objective. And if you are to be confirmed by this House, and I hope you will be, then you will often hear that there are some things that can't be changed. But this is a change that we must see.
Thank you. Mr. Lambert. Our shared house is on fire. A fire caused by a deregulated climate, biodiversity which is collapsing, and natural resources become ever scarcer. This fire is further fuelled by the neoliberal revolution and the technological revolution. This fire is also burning up the rule of law and fundamental freedoms. Faced with this three-pronged emergency, it's no longer enough just to state our good intent or our determination. We need a ferocious attempt to change direction, even if that means overturning the efforts of those who want to defend the status quo. The Green Free European Alliance Group was elected in May with an agenda for change. We want to be able to count on you, Mrs. von der Leyen. 3 weeks ago, you didn't have the faintest idea that you would soon be holding the highest office in the European Union. In other words, you've been on a pretty steep learning curve. Your performance last week didn't convince us. You didn't seem to show enough urgency, nor indeed a determination to redirect the ship of the European Union. The speech you've just made and the written documents backing it up are a big step forward. I would like to commend your commitment, supported by clear examples, to move towards parity for men and women. I was also delighted to hear you say that you're personally committed to reducing by 2030 our CO2 emissions by half. You've taken up the green idea of a carbon tax at our borders, as well as the idea of a trans-European unemployment fund, which has been a taboo in your political family up until now. However, despite those commitments, what you said falls far short of what we want. Let me give you a few examples. So, for example, why have you decided to raise our efforts to meet the climate challenge in 2 different stages? If we look at the details of what you wrote to 2 political groups, we see the idea of conditionality emerging once again. In other words, we will only move when others are willing to move as well. You also quite rightly underlined that the ecological transition shouldn't leave anybody behind. However, I'm sure you'd agree that if the cost of carbon increases, everybody, including the poorest in society, will be affected. The response to that is not, as you say, a European adjustment fund, but, on the contrary, a root and branch reform of our tax system so as to ensure that finally we move towards greater equity. The environment is more than just the climate. You didn't speak at all about biodiversity or ever scarcer resources such as fresh water or farming land. The European farming policy, agricultural policy, has a disastrous effect on Europe, and it's the biggest budget item. But that's, once again, a taboo for you. Once again, your ambitions fall short because of entrenched interests. For the time being, we see all sorts of European instruments which continue to exhaust the planet's resources while exacerbating inequality. You have said that the treaty should include clauses referring to sustainable development, as it already does. However, you very cautiously refrain from saying these clauses should be binding, in particular when it comes to preventing beneficial treatment for so-called investors. Nor have I heard you question the fundamental idea, the very scandal of this fortress Europe. It's quite unacceptable that the European Union continues to rely on failed states and rogue states to guarantee the impermeability of its borders. The cost of this is massive violations of human rights carried out by armed bands or the so-called Libyan border force and coast guards, which are funded with European money. You have suggested a migration pact, Ms von der Leyen. Let me remind you, madam, such a pact already exists. It was adopted by a majority of 5 groups in the European Parliament. Let's not reinvent the wheel. Please take over our proposal and fight for it in the Council. When it comes to the rule of law, your language was perhaps strong, but your proposals remain very vague. The time now has come to fundamentally change things. We have to ensure that European values be respected everywhere, rather than simply playing into the hands of the heads of state and government like in Hungary or Poland, who continue to regularly violate European fundamental freedoms and the separation of powers. What we need is a clear change of direction in the face of the triple emergency facing us: environment, social and climate. What you seem to be suggesting is incremental changes and all sorts of vague ideas. I'm sure you'll understand that at the present time, the ecologists in the European Parliament are not willing to support you to head up the European Commission. Ms von der Leyen, let me remind you that since the elections, our group has done its utmost to ensure that we can establish a pro-European and pro-change majority in this House. Such an enterprise takes time. Your insistence on calling for a vote today deprives us of that valuable time. You might have shown great courtesy to us, but we haven't really seen a clear commitment to such an alliance. On the contrary, you seem to be willing to accept support from wherever it comes, including from the nationalist members in this House. And that's something we simply can't agree on. As I said to you a week ago, the haggling starts when somebody says no. So let me assure you that we'll be willing to support you whenever your proposals live up to the enormous challenges facing us in the fields of democracy, the environment and social affairs. In other words, proposals designed to tackle the existential problems facing our continent.
Meuthen.
Thank you. Mr. Meuthen, over to you.
Mr. President, colleagues, Minister von der Leyen, today in this House we have a very important decision to make on a person who will become the President of the European Commission, which is of great importance to the European Union and the Member States, and therefore we will have to make this decision very carefully. It is only somebody of the highest calibre who will be able to take that post. Minister von der Leyen, I have great respect for you as a person, but in our group we have looked into this carefully and feel that the requirements of the post are not ones that you are able to meet. Let me just set that out. First of all, we Germans, we have a way of doing politics, and we have had some experience of that back home over years when you were family minister, minister for work and social matters, and then more recently defence minister. And in none of those offices were you serving the interests of the German people and did justice to the jobs. I will spare people here an explicit list of all of your failings. You saved so much money, you destroyed our army. It has never been so badly equipped, and it is basically incapable of carrying out defence actions. And nobody will rue your departure were you to become Commission President back home, and it is important to take that into account. The German government in earlier times has had posts in Brussels, but there is nothing that we see that speaks in favour of the Commission presidency being done by you better than your previous jobs. There is a long list of vague promises that you made, and often they included their exact opposites, and that has not just given rise to criticism by us but by others. Article 7 procedures against Poland and Hungary being upheld. In the ECR group, you said the rule of law was important and tolerance of migrants, but these are obvious contradictions, and there is now a whole panoply of nice-sounding ideas that you've put forward. You've been on a media tour, a classical mainstream politician, making empty promises, playing a kind of Jekyll and Hyde game with the groups in the vain hope that at the end of it all there will be sufficient votes that will be garnered for your election. The problem is that you don't have a convincing vision of a modern Europe that will serve the people of Europe, a clever way of focusing on the core aspects of that Europe. In contrary to that, you talk about more competence for the centre and talking on people's behalves. So when it comes to the questions that I put in the Conference of Presidents last week, you first of all didn't answer two of the questions, and the third question you answered in a very unsatisfactory way. So the kind of performance you put in today is not one that we find persuasive in the ID group, and this is why we will vote against you. Thank you.
Grazie.
Thank you. Mr. Fito.
Thank you, President. I listened very closely to what you had to say, Mrs. von der Leyen, and also I listened to you in our group meeting. I do have to say that in your words today, I would say that your positions have changed rather from what we heard last week. I would just like to start off by picking up on something that you've said a number of times over the last few days and weeks. You said the Parliament is the heart of democracy. But I would say that at the moment things can only work if everyone respects the system. You talked about gender equality, about the importance of having a woman as head of commission for the first time. But that's just after what we saw yesterday evening in this Parliament. We saw a woman who was already Prime Minister in her own country. It wasn't chosen as President of the Employment Committee. And this is something that's illogical and incomprehensible. And I'm recalling this because I think it's important. When we're talking about rules, we can't be hypocritical. We can't ask for consensus or for the Parliament to play a role if we don't respect the D'Hondt system or if these kind of events come about. And in these recent hours, you've written a number of letters. Words may disappear, but letters remain. And so we read very carefully what you wrote to Renew and the Socialists. And so this morning we would like to see some clarifications. For example, Mrs. Garcia Perez asked you for clarifications about the rule of law mechanism. We would also like to have some clarifications from you on this in your reply. Over the last 5 years, we've seen certain methods that have been invented by Mr. Timmermans, and so I think we're talking about different things. And I think we don't have any clarity about this rule of law mechanism that you talked about. It's also important to talk about climate change. Obviously, there are some positive points on climate change. You set out things such as the Just Transition Fund in order to help to mitigate the effects of climate change, a sustainable investment bank, making use of private capital, But once again, you're talking about targets, and we have these very excellent ambitions, but we have no idea how to achieve them. Everything seems to be rather confused. If I've understood correctly, you're suggesting that the target should be 50%. Last week it was 55%. It's quite a significant difference when it comes to the objective we're trying to achieve. Your declaration seems to be one of intentions. Some countries, as you know, are still one-third dependent on coal. There are important issues such as ones our group has always spoken out about. You talk about a European minimum wage that would and guaranteeing all young people a job. What resources are you going to use for that? And what about the roles of the individual member states in all of this? You also gave a very nice example this morning about this refugee who came to Germany and you welcomed him. It was a very nice story. But we're not just talking about refugees. We also have migrants, we have illegal immigrants, and perhaps, again, you could provide clarifications on this. Last week, you said something quite serious, we think. Somebody who is under inquiry in our country because they didn't respect the orders issued by the national authorities and helped people flee Italian forces of law and order. This morning, the Libe committee is talking about inviting that person to a hearing. So I'd like to have clear responses from you on all of this as well. That will help us to make the decision that we need to take at the end of this meeting in our group meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Shirdewan.
A lei la parola.
Ja, vielen Dank, Herr Präsident.
Thank you, President. Ms. von der Leyen, we heard a lot in your address about the men and women, the citizens of Europe. Over the last few days, I've had hundreds or thousands, indeed, emails, and I'm sure other colleagues have as well, talking about your nomination. I think it's important the people of Europe, the European demos, be given the floor. I'd like to quote from one of these emails. The person who wrote it said that as a voter, I insist that the European Parliament should ensure that one of the Spitzenkandidates be elected as President of the European Commission. And the woman who wrote the email continued by writing that the appointment of the German Defence Minister to the presidency of the European Commission would, in my view, have fatal consequences in terms of the future of the European Union, confirming a trend towards greater militarisation and isolation. Clearly, there is still criticism about the way in which your nomination has been put forward. And I'd like to refer back to the meeting we had last week. You came along and met the left-wing group in the European Parliament. You set out your vision of the European Union. It became clear to us that your vision is quite different from ours. Let me explain. Ours is the only group which is fully determined to reject a continuation of existing policy making. When you talk about the future of the European Union, I think the time has come for us to bring an end, to break a clear break with austerity, this new liberal policy which we pursued for so many years. The fact is, colleagues, national budgets are continuing to be subjected to cuts, and this has prevented us investing in public projects, in investigation, in education, in social affairs, and in hard-hitting measures to help fight climate change. The people who suffer most from these neoliberal policies are the men and women who live throughout the European Union. Ms von der Leyen, if we really are to fight the climate emergency, we have to act now. And if we want to bring about fundamental changes to our economic structures, we have to start by investing now, and anybody who wants to guarantee security for the European Union must start by making a clean break with this misguided austerity policy. 113 million people, these are official figures from the European Commission, currently live below the poverty line in the European Union. We have a clear expectation from any candidate for the presidency of the European Commission. We want more than just flowery words. We want clear commitments. You have to make it clear you've understood. You have to make it clear you're committed to rolling out a social offensive for the European Union. My objective, you should be saying, is that in 5 years' time, nobody in Europe, regardless of how old they are, of where they live in Europe, should see their very existence being threatened. Everybody in Europe should have a dignified existence. So, for example, in the field of tax policy, unfortunately, you've been once again very vague. There's no point in taking kids' gloves when it comes to fighting for tax justice. Our expectation of a credible candidate for the presidency of the Commission is that they have the determination and courage to state clearly they want to bring an end to tax dumping, that they want to close tax havens within the European Union, and that they want to ensure that those with wealth be subjected to fair taxes, so that it's to ensure that we can achieve genuine tax justice. Whereas apparently further billions of euros are now to be invested in the European defence sector. You've made that clear in your address. That's money which would be far better spelt on education, training and social justice. That money won't be going to social affairs. It'll be going into modern weapons systems. Some people are even dreaming about a European space army. To me, that sounds more like a nightmare than a dream. But the idea of a European army or an army of Europeans, you're just playing with words. But your objective is clear. What you want to do is to enhance the military side of the European Union to back up your foreign policy. This is something which our group in the European Parliament rejects decisively. We call for a Europe which tries to help solve conflicts, with a first step towards an international disarmament conference. My final point, I would like to make it clear that the European external border is currently the world's most dangerous border. And this, for me, is a clear sign of the failure of European politicians, the fact that every day people continue to drown in the Mediterranean, whereas those few people in certain member states who continue to defend universal human rights are thrown into prison. Ms von der Leyen, we listened clearly to what you said. I believe that our plan for the future of the European Union, a social European Union, a European Union based on climate justice and peace, I don't think that our vision of Europe is compatible with what you've told us today. So unfortunately, we won't be able to support you this evening. Thank you, Mr Farage, on behalf of non-attached members.
Well, I may be speaking from the back of the chamber today, but as I predicted last time I was here, in the European elections, the Brexit Party were very much to the front of the elections and massive, massive winners. And I come back to a place that has been humbled and humiliated. The European Council stitch-up has rendered this place impotent until today, when you've got some real power if you choose to use it. What you've seen from Ursula von der Leyen today is an attempt for the European Union to take control of every single aspect of our lives. She wants to build a centralised, undemocratic, updated form of communism that will render nation-state parliaments, where the state controls everything, where nation-state parliaments will cease to have any relevance at all. I have to say, from our perspective, in some ways, I'm really rather pleased, because you've just made Brexit a lot more popular in the United Kingdom. Thank God we're leaving. But it is in the aspect of defence that I think people's minds should be focused. She's a fanatic for building a European army, but she's not alone. When it's completed, NATO will cease to exist or have any relevance in Europe at all. And of course, not to be left out of this, French President Emmanuel Macron, on Bastille Day last Sunday, stood at the front of an open-top car with his nascent European defence force behind him, looking for all the world like an updated version of Napoleon. Be in no doubt, 5 years of these people, the European Defence Union will be complete. And what is there for defence can also be used for attack. And you as a House will have no control over it. Vote against this nominee, strike a blow for democracy. Strike a blow for your citizens. Do
Grazie,
it today.
onorevole Farage.
Thank you, Mr. Farage, says the President.
E adesso
I would like now to give the floor to Ms von der Leyen, asking her to respond to the comments made by the heads of political groups. Go ahead, madam. Thank you, President. To be quite honest with you, having listened to the last speaker, that provides further proof how important it is that we continue to work closely with our British colleagues in the future. But I think, Mr. Farage, we can probably do without what you've got to say here. And that's what I find beautiful about Europe. Here in our Europe, countries come together. They come together on a voluntary basis. Nobody has forced them to come together. All our countries know that strength is in unity. By working together, we can defend the values which are close to all of our hearts and which brought us together. The great challenges facing us in the world are so enormous that none of us alone can face up to them. Only by working together, by cooperating, can we develop the strength, the soft power, which is uniquely European and which is at the very heart of our European values. That's the source of our strength. That's why it's possible for us to talk about an optimistic future. This is why it's so important that we deploy our strength to guarantee a better future for our children. Let me now pick up on some of the subjects referred to. The social market economy. This is one of the great characteristics, the unique characteristics of the European Union. This powerful link between a strong economy and our other values. Everybody knows, however, that in this economy everybody has to work hard, and we have to ensure that the fruits of our hard work be given back to the people. That's the key idea of the social market economy. The social pillar of the social market economy is something which is supported by the Commission, the Parliament and the Council. There's a clear commitment to continue to support this system. We have to work with determination to defend that. Obviously, we're still far from perfect, but we are determined to identify shortcomings in the social pillar so as to correct them, and that must be one of our overarching priorities. We've heard as well about sustainability directives. Here, once again, these are leitmotifs in our policy making. Sustainability objectives surely are something which all of us must support. I think it must be clear to everybody now that the clock is ticking. Time is running out. Our planet needs help urgently. Our whole life and society is built on natural resources which are under threat. We have to ensure that we can deal with these resources in a sustainable, protective way. This is why it's so important that we all recognise the value of sustainability objectives, and we should all do our utmost to pursue them. As far as the progressive approach is concerned, the two-step approach is concerned, we have to ensure those two steps be rolled out in parallel. This is why recently I've said that we have to start by tackling this in the European Parliament. However, we all know that we need major players in the world if we are to move forward with these objectives. This is why it's important that the European Union can and must take a leadership role. That's the only way to bring about change. The Paris Climate Agreement represented a unique coming together of the powerful in the world. Let's continue to draw on the spirit of Paris, the ideas of Paris, to try to defend our future. The second enormous challenge facing us is digitalisation. Here, once again, we have to stand united. On the one hand, we need to be able to draw on those people in society who are able to thrive with the new digital world, who promote our economy. At the same time, we have to ensure that the digital economy be protected with ethical rules concerning artificial intelligence, cyberspace. We have to ensure that we have robust measures so as to ensure that that protects everybody. And we as Europeans have to become major players in the cyber world. We know there are many risks in the cyber world, major risks for our economy, or indeed major risks for our society. Here, once again, none of our states alone are able to face up to those challenges. Only by working together can we succeed in laying the foundations of a secure future, which our people deserve. The human dimension of digitalisation must be the primary objective of our economy. We have to protect our people. Somebody who works must be given protection. And we now have to find ways of ensuring that the values which have always protected workers in the existing economy be transferred to the digital economy. How can we defend platform workers, cloud economy workers? We have to ensure that we can transfer that protection for the benefit of all of our citizens. Ladies and gentlemen, I listened to all the speakers very clearly. When I heard Mr. Moyton speaking, I must say I was quite relieved to hear that you won't be voting for me, since everything you said goes contrary to my deepest values.
C'è una richiesta.
I have a request to speak, a point of order regarding the rules. Mr. Semsrott.
Ja, ich möchte.
I would like to refer to Annex 7, Article 1, full disclosure of financial interest, and I would ask Parliament to look into whether there is a possible conflict of interests. I've also got a proposal as to how that might look. This is the way we do it. Thank you.
Sì, però il suo non è un appello, è un richiamo al regolamento.
Apparently, this isn't actually a point of order based on the rules. I'd like to resume the debate, please. Mr. Caspary.
Lei la parola. 2 minuti.
2 minutes, Mr. Caspary.
Sehr geehrter Herr
Mr. President, the European People's Party and the European Christian Democrats, with Manfred Weber as our lead candidate in these elections, were hoping that he would be the President of the European Commission. But after the election in Council, it has been a vote by people with their feet, and only some groups, unlike 5 years ago, had the courage to make sure that the most successful group in the European Parliament would get their lead candidate put forward. But we are delighted, Mrs von der Leyen, that you are here, and through to 6 p.m. we will do everything that we can to ensure that you do get that job and become President of the European Commission. Secondly, in the European Union, we find ourselves in a difficult position. You have a huge package of work to do, and whenever, as in previous years, there's been a lot of work to do, we in the European Parliament have been able to work across groups, not with all groups, because unfortunately there are extremists and populists that don't want to see Europe progress further but to be destroyed. But we have been able to work across groups, between the pro-European groups, to enter into compromises to make sure that this continent can be further developed in the interests of the citizens. And I would appeal to you, therefore, to take this European Parliament, for which more than half of the citizens in the European Union participate in the elections, to elect, to move Europe forward and to make sure that blockages in the Council can be prevented. And we in the European Parliament have always been prepared to lead the way to further development of the European Union, and I hope that you will lead the charge with us henceforth. Mr. Moyton, we've heard your tirade of hate against Mrs. von der Leyen, and yesterday evening, as leader of your party, didn't even manage to get a majority together in your party conference. And so I think it's time for you to stop kicking out and actually put stop to it.
2 minuti.
Thank you, Mr. Gualtieri, for 2 minutes.
Grazie, Presidente. Signora.
Thank you, President. Mrs. von der Leyen, your nomination is the result of a difficult bloc in the European Council who were unable to find the necessary majority for any of the Spitzenkandidates. Now, this possibility is provided for under the rules. However, politically and institutionally, this is wounding, and we have to try to heal the damage in order to ensure that we support the European democratic process. Our group and others therefore have held political discussions with you, and our support is linked to clear commitments. This is a significant change and should help to strengthen this relationship between Europe and its citizens. And it's something that we'll all take seriously and that the Council must take it seriously. Otherwise, the damage to its credibility will be incalculable. In your speech today and your letter to the group, you provided positive responses to a lot of our requests. More ambitious environmental objectives, an investment plan for sustainability. And I will just emphasise that we need more public investment in this, more public investment. Also more use of flexibility to ensure growth. A European scheme for unemployment, fighting youth unemployment, and ensuring that we have a common tax base for businesses, defence of the rule of law, humanitarian corridors, a new pact for for asylum based on humanitarian considerations, more cooperation in crucial areas, strengthening the Spitzenkandidat process. We appreciate the commitments that you've taken, and we will fight tooth and nail to ensure that they are properly implemented. In your letter and in the debate, I think we can clearly see, and this is a positive thing, that our new interlocutors in the Commission will be the pro-European forces. We would never accept any ambiguity on this. To me, it's clear, and I think this is good for Europe, that the nationalists will be irrelevant. Mrs. von der Leyen, in our group you will find a careful but demanding listener. We won't merely accept words. If we don't see deeds follow from these words, then you will no longer have our support. If, on the other hand, the commitments that we've asked from you are enacted and strengthened, then you can count on our faithful and vigilant support, and that we will fight for a fairer and more united Europe.
Grazie, onorevole Séjourné.
Thank you, Mr. Séjourné, for 1 minute. Thank you, President. Madam von der Leyen, I will be very brief. I have just 1 minute. I'm speaking on behalf of my French delegation and my group, of course. And we will be supporting this evening, and we hope that you'll have a broad-based majority in this pro-European House. The elections were somewhat unusual. Many people expected the nationalists to win a majority in the House, but in fact it turns out that we have a pro-European majority in the European Parliament willing to support many of your proposals, and you'll find supporters around the House in the different political groups. In your proposals and projects, we also heard about a series of ideas which we support: a climate bank, carbon neutrality, and carbon tax neutrality, and a certain number of social proposals, all of which are very important for certain political groups, including those political groups which form the pro-European majority in this House. So obviously we have to go further. For example, on trade agreements, we have to ensure that the Paris Agreement be made an essential condition for all future trade deals. And perhaps a message now to our friends in the Green Group. The fact that we have a pro-European majority in this House is conditional on broad-based support from all the pro-European groups. The Greens stress the urgent and overriding nature of the climate emergency. This is absolutely true. But in the light of your declarations today, I would hope that those who support those environmental proposals support you. Given the existential threat hanging over us, I think it's important that we be in a position to rally a substantial majority behind you today. So I'd call on the sense of responsibility of all members of the House so as to ensure that all the pro-European members here support you as President of the Commission? Thank you, Mr. Giegold. 1.5 minutes.
Minister von der Leyen, you offered the Greens a Green Deal, but there's a green headline at the top of that, but there's not a lot of green substance in it. The world faces two major ecological crises, the climate crisis and the extermination crisis. Now, when it comes to the climate, this Parliament has clearly set out that by 2030 we have to have 55% less emissions. You haven't committed yourself to that today. But this is the yardstick which young people around Europe are calling for quite rightly, and that scientists demand of us. We need a clear commitment by you, minus 55% greenhouse gases by 2030. And the second thing is extinction. You have lived considerable portions of your life in Hamburg. I used to count butterflies in the Hanover, in the Hanover region. Now there's the crisis of biodiversity, and we require a new agriculture policy for Europe that protects farmers and puts a stop to extinction. So please commit yourself today to a new European agricultural policy which does provide for protection of the climate and is a commitment to putting a stop to further extinctions. It's not just enough to regret loss of life in the Mediterranean when it comes to our borders. Are you prepared to have set up a European rescue at sea mission and to strengthen Frontex in such a way that it puts an end to the death in the Mediterranean? I think what your headlines were good, but the content was insufficient.
Thank you. I'd like to ask all speakers to respect the allotted speaking time. We have many speakers on the list this morning. The next speaker is Mr. Zanni for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, President. Minister von der Leyen, in your speech, we didn't find anything surprising. It's a speech that we've heard a number of times here in this chamber, full of promises that you won't be able to keep either. The road ahead of you is a difficult one. We've seen this in recent days, and we've seen that in the debate this morning in this chamber. You're trying to bring together two parties and two very different set of interests. You have the right, who want to control immigration, who want to be harsher on immigration, who want a more realistic and pragmatic approach to the economy to support industry. And then on the other hand, you have the left, who have a more ideological approach, who want to welcome people indiscriminately and who are hardliners on the climate. And this is going to be your challenge. As a centre-right, you're going to have to decide whether you want to give ground to the left, as you seem to want to do in the letter that you've written to the socialists, or whether, as you seem in your speech today, want to have a more pragmatic approach, which will actually allow you, Europe, to move out of the stalemate that this approach has led it to so far. We need to move out of this endless crisis. You talked about welcoming people to saving lives at sea. I mean, this is all very well and good. But in your speech, I didn't see very much about the millions of Europeans who have suffered and are continuing to suffer because of the erroneous policies implemented by the majority here. I didn't hear a single word about the disaster in Greece, about the fact that that country has been destroyed by the policies imposed on it by the European Union. It seems that you don't want to move forward with the radical changes that citizens need, and that you don't have the majority to do so. Excluding ideas from people who think differently from you will not help Europe. It won't help you to govern, and it won't help this Parliament to play its role over the next 5 years. We don't think that you represent the change that we need, and we don't think you're going to have a very easy life in trying to hold together a majority. You can't please everybody. So once again, I would just say that the votes from those on this side of the room will not be supporting you. We know that this Parliament, this legislation will not accept the right, and we know that those who are in this group will not be supporting in the next 5 years.
Thank you. Mr. Ziller for 1 minute.
President, Mrs. von der Leyen, in politics in this House we understand you sometimes need to create a majority, but it's always important what kind of promises are you giving and how far you are going with those promises. Like a chef in a big, huge restaurant, you are responsible for ingredients which you will put in a baked pie, and what would be the taste of this pie and how customers would be satisfied. After 5 years, I think in the citizens of Riga and also in small village in west of Portugal should be said that, look, that was a majority of them. They said this is a good result. I don't think this is the case. Why? Last week you came to our group and you said one of the key principles is subsidiarity. Today I calculated, it was the first time you said it was 30 minutes. I don't think that transnational lists would become more close to the hearts of the citizens. I don't think that the qualified majority vote will decide everything and it would be good for everybody. And where is the rights of minorities on political scene and proportionality? So, sorry, it's a bit disappointment today comparably with last week. Thank you.
Mr. Ferreira, 1 minute, please.
Muito obrigado, Sra. Presidente. Sra. von der Leyen, a senhora representa o Conselho.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Ms. von der Leyen. Inequality between countries has determined the path of Europe for many decades. We've seen surpluses built up in one place and deficits elsewhere. We've seen millions of workers in non-employment or underemployment. We've seen inequality between men and women. And it's big capital that has tended to make most of the running when it comes to this Europe, privatizations, attacks against public services, monetarism, and basically war as a concept. So social justice, defense of the environment, a Europe of democracy, solidarity, cooperation and peace, this other Europe cannot be born from that consensus of the recent decades, and it is therefore the usual suspects that are going to be taking the lead, but we will continue the fight.
1 minute, please. 1.5 minutes, I correct myself. Thank you.
Thanks. Liebe Frau von der
Ms. von der Leyen, I'd like to welcome you to the European Parliament. I am delighted that I'll no longer be the least serious representative of European democracy. I think the new casting line for the European Council has it Mr. Josep Borrell, somebody who had to stand down from a European academic institute because he simply forgot to declare an annual payment of €300,000. He is to become the High Representative of European values around the world. Christine Lagarde, a legal expert who was found guilty of diverting €400 million of public money and who's never headed up a national bank, is now to head up the ECB. Meanwhile, Charles Michel, a Belgian who couldn't even form a functioning government in Belgium, is to become President of the Council, and in an effort to try to find common ground between ever more complex national interests. Meanwhile, we also have you, Ms. von der Leyen, a German minister who has no knowledge of the European Union, who has been accused of hiring a whole bevy of overpaid consultants, as well as mismanagement and a failure to respect rules. In other words, the largest campaign for the arms industry for many years. Just to wind up this incredible campaign, you are now reaching an agreement with Benito Salvini the PiS party from Poland and Hungarian populists. I don't think we should put Europe in the hands of Mrs. von der Leyen.
Tisztelt von der Leyen asszony, a néppárt...
Madam von der Leyen, I'm head of the Hungarian delegation in EPP, and I'd just like to summarise my position for you. The new Commission President must work to defend the external borders. We can only control migration by defending our external borders. Illegal immigration is a threat to the day-to-day peace, to our daily lives, and to citizens. We have to support the efforts of the countries who are defending Europe's external borders. Article 4 of the treaty says that national identity must be respected and that it's an indissociable part of fundamental rights. In recent years, the left in the European Parliament and the pro-migrant parties have tried to launch an Article 7 procedure. However, that is ignoring the requirements under Article 4 of the treaties. You must defend the treaties and therefore must defend the sovereignty of member states. Also, when it comes to regional development as well as agricultural assistance and rural development, these are all things that are very important for member states and regions and is one of the fundamental objectives of European cooperation. We see this in Article 3. Economic and social cohesion and territorial cohesion are very important. So I would ask that in the next MFF we don't punish or give sanctions, but we support member states that fall under the European average in order to ensure that they can catch up as quickly as possible, particularly in the east of Europe.
Madam Dalli. Thank you, Chair. The next 5 years require leadership that does not consider business as usual as the point of departure. And we need a European Commission that is ambitious, progressive and not resistant to change. It is positive that you plan to make the European Union climate neutral by 2050 and that you commit to put this into law during your first 100 days. But when it comes to the 2030 target, keep in mind that this Parliament asked for a 2030 target of 55% because this is what is in line with the long-term strategy and with the Paris goals. You speak about extending the ETS. Maritime and aviation need to contribute, but the ETS can never be extended to transport in general. The risks undermining the CO2 standards we have worked hard for. That's why we ask for a clear commitment that you will not go back from the CO2 standards that we agreed upon. We need to see much more on environment. We need you to speak and commit to a biodiversity strategy, and also we need to understand your position on the non-toxic environment strategy. The EU requires also a revamped industrial policy, an Industry 4.0 that does not focus only on digitisation and automation, but includes also the ecological aspect. An industrial policy that takes into account our current workers, our future employees, our students and our youths. And allow me a final word on migration. You speak about a fresh start on migration. And as an MEP hailing from one of the frontline member states, Malta, I urge you to put migration as a priority where solidarity does not remain a buzzword, but where legislative proposals such as the Dublin regulation are enacted and become law, so that not only a few countries shoulder the responsibility alone, as is happening today. We need policies that are game changers if the European project is to move forward, and these are the policies that we as SND will be pushing for. Thank you.
For 1 minute now, Madam Vaughan.
Thank you. Along with many colleagues in Renew Europe, I have thought hard about whether to support Mrs von der Leyen today. The system that has put her in front of us is clearly broken. But I was placed in this chamber by millions of British people who believe in the European Union, who demand the best from Europe and who want us to stay here. We would be fools to refuse this opportunity. Europe needs action, not indecision. But, Ms von der Leyen, I tell you firmly and clearly that my vote does not come cheaply. If I am to support you today, this is the price that I ask for your support. You must reform this broken system. You must commit real action and not just words to the climate emergency. You must immediately begin reform of the Dublin Agreement. And, Ms von der Leyen, the price for me will be to use your influence at every table at which you sit to agree a long extension so that Britain may remain part of this European family.
Mr. Eickhout, 1 minute, please.
Thank you very much. Minister von der Leyen, thank you for your speech. Compared to last week, that's a huge step. But it really makes wonder, what are we voting for? Who are we voting for? There's so much changing and there's so much unclear now. For example, on climate change. You are fiddling around with the -50, -55, but what is Europe going to officially put on the table when Paris officially starts December 2020? Still unclear. You are mentioning in your programme the biodiversity strategy, but no word on agriculture policies. What are you going to do about the current reform of agriculture policies? Then extending ETS with traffic. What does that mean? The carbon prices we need in order to make sure our cars are cleaning up are way higher than the carbon prices we are having now. This sounds like the tune of the German car industry. They would love to see these prices instead of the CO2 standards. And finally, on the rule of law. Very good words, but one concrete action. Do you support the European Parliament in its Article 7 procedure against Hungary? It's time you become concrete on that.
Monsieur Bay, 1 minute.
Madame von der Leyen.
Ms von der Leyen, 5 years ago in this very House, your predecessor, Mr. Jean-Claude Juncker, declared that this would be the last chance Commission. In other words, in all likelihood, you will be head of the Commission which heads towards liquidation before the end of the European Union, where the peoples of Europe pave the way for genuine European cooperation, an end to the opaque procedures in the European institutions. You are running for office now because you've been able to reassure some political groups by giving them guarantees. As you made clear, you continue to roll back the borders of neoliberal free trade, which continues to destroy our societies and our planet. You will continue to bind the hands of nations by doing away with votes based on unanimity. You will move towards an ever more lax approach when it comes to migration and multiculturalism, something which undermine the values and security of our countries. Thanks to all of this, Madam, you will no doubt manage to get your hands on the votes of the Liberals and the Left. And that's the very same reason, Madam, why you won't be getting our votes.
Mr. Lundgren, 1 minute.
Thank you. Mrs von der Leyen's belief in the United States of Europe is in strong contrast with the right of member states to decide things for themselves. Member states, according to your vision, will lose a lot of sovereignty in this future Europe of yours, and common sense is what we require so that member states in Europe can cooperate optimally with each other and exchange ideas. A central political union is not supported by the electorate, and member states want to retain their identities and cultures and history. Each member state is obviously going to defend its own interests. What you need to support are the inhabitants of every country rather than your personal interests or ambitions. And having listened to your speech this morning, it is absolutely clear for me that you are not up to this job. I'm going to be voting against your candidacy, and I hope that the remainder of the House will do so as well.
1 minute, Madam Mathias.
Senhora von der Leyen, senhora chegou aqui com o apoio.
Madam von der Leyen, you have been to a number of groups and set out the commitments on things that had been blocked in this House. What we need in the European Union is to make choices. And therefore, I would ask to ensure that we have consistency. Those with excessive deficit, what are we going to do? Either we invest in the planet or we invest in militarisation and in the interests of the German arms industry. Which of these options will you pick? Are we going to fight offshoring in the European Union, or are we going to support workers' rights? Are we going to fight for the environment, or are we going to destroy it? What will you choose? Are we going to have a welcoming migration policy, or are we going to close our borders? Which one will you choose, Mrs. von der Leyen? We need clear choices over the next 5 years. We don't need 2 weeks of contradictory speeches. Otherwise, it's going to be another term of disappointment.
For Madam Begin.
Grazie, signora Presidente.
Thank you, Madam President. President, as a woman and mother of 3 children, I'm delighted to see for the first time a woman earmarked for the presidency of the European Commission. This is clearly a step forward. However, my hope is that change won't just stop there. The governments which supported your nomination clearly saw somebody suited for this high office. At the same time, however, they also wanted to say no to those who'd come forward with a package of proposals based on the arrogance that others would just accept that. Those who supported you wanted to reiterate that here in Europe, if we want to live together, we have to be willing to decide together, all of us together. Ms. von der Leyen, after our meeting, you set out a series of focus points in your proposal guaranteeing a European basic wage, a new pact on migration, ambitious reforms on the climate, and finally, a guarantee for the legislative powers of the European Parliament. This is why the 5-Star Movement intends to support your proposal. However, every day over the next 5 days, you'll have to prove that you've lived up to our trust. We'll be following your work closely. We will never hesitate when it comes to countering your proposals in the hardest possible way, if that's necessary, to defend the people of Europe and Italy, as we've always done. To defend Europe, it's not just enough to be German, French, Italian or Spanish. We have to draw on the best of all our individual countries and prove to the rest of the world that the European Union is far more than the sum of its parts. Ms von der Leyen, we hope that you'll be the change which the people of Europe want so badly. Please do not disappoint them. Thank you.
Mr. González Pons.
Everyone knows that the way in which Council treated this Parliament was inappropriate, and it was inappropriate how you were nominated to be Commission leader. However, we also know this is the worst possible time for an institutional crisis. Parliament can't support the anti-Europeans. And even if Council's been irresponsible, Parliament still has its responsibilities. Council was wrong, but Parliament can't also be wrong. That's why we will place our trust in you. The world is in crisis and there is a trade war, and so the European Parliament can't, and the European Union has to take its responsibility. However, you have to show respect towards the European Parliament and towards European democracy. we need to see proper dialogue in Europe, not dogmatism. We shouldn't distinguish between the East and the West, the North and the South of Europe, and no one needs to be left behind. You are from the party that won the European elections, and so nominating you would meet the expectations of European citizens. I am sure that we can count on you to defend the rule of law in Spain and Spanish unity. Your commitment to fighting climate change is undoubtable and is exemplary. You represent pro-Europeanism, and so voting for you today is voting against anti-Europeanism, is voting against Euroscepticism. And because also you are the first woman to lead the Commission, Mrs. von der Leyen, all of those who believe in equality between men and women today can't let this opportunity pass us by. So you can count on my vote.
Mr. Moraes, 2 minutes.
Minister von der Leyen, there is a reason why you mentioned in quick succession two of the critical issues which my group regards as the key priorities: the relaunch of the Dublin process and the support for an additional comprehensive European rule of law mechanism. I quote your words in your letter to our group. And the reason is that these issues may not be just all of the important issues. You mentioned climate change, the social pillar and so on. But they are issues which could make or break the European Union. We all know this. And for this reason, you say the correct words, you give the headlines that we want to hear. But as you've heard from many members, we have to have the concrete ideas underneath these words. So on the Dublin process, on the so-called Pact for Migration, you and I know that it requires qualified majority voting from the member states, the inertia of the Council, that there has been nothing on migration, that we see people drowning in the Mediterranean, that there is this inertia. Now, you can do something about this. You mentioned QMV on foreign relations issues, but you didn't mention it here. Criminalisation of NGOs, the humanitarian corridors, all of these things are the detail that we need to hear. And on the question of the support for the rule of law, again, we need to see the detail. The MFF, the sanctions, Hungary and Poland. Name the countries, because this is the essence of what we have to do here in order not to break Europe. And President, if I could just say, I'm a UK member. People are tweeting at the moment that you want an extension come what may. This is not what you've said. In a letter to us, you said in quite a dignified way, should an extension be required for the United Kingdom, there would have to be good reasons. And I think you dealt with the Brexit issue here in a dignified and pragmatic way. Pragmatic. That is the kind of partnership we want to see, as opposed to the kind of fantasy Brexit that we're hearing from other people in this chamber. So for this reason, pragmatic partnership is the way forward.
Mr. Garicano, 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mrs. von der Leyen, I want to congratulate you on an excellent speech and on an excellent process over the last couple of weeks, working with Renew Europe to get our priorities, to include them in your programme. I want to say to the Greens and to Mr. Eckhout, yes, I think there is change over the last weeks, and I think we have to recognise this change. I don't think it's wavering. I think there is a recognition here that there is a challenge that Europe is facing, the challenge that Europe is facing that comes from those sides which want Europe to fail, from populists and nationalists who see the frustration and anxieties that our citizens feel and who offer this feeling of control and this sense that, well, if we just get back the walls and we divide our countries again, then we will recover control and then it will be better. Mrs. von der Leyen knows that that's the wrong alternative. She understands those anxieties. She has shown over these weeks that she can work with us to build a better Europe, to build a Europe that responds to our concerns on democratisation, to your concerns on climate, to our concerns and all of our concerns on climate, on digitalisation, on the frustration that our citizens feel with how the euro crisis was resolved or not well resolved. And for that reason, I think this is the moment where all of us here need to make an effort and say, well, maybe not everything is there in that package, but it's the moment to come together and say no to populism and nationalism and yes to a better Europe that Mrs. von der Leyen is offering us today. Thank you.
Mr. Jadot, for 1 minute.
Madam candidate, in the hearings you said that the EU-Mercosur agreement was an important one. Now, what commitments are you going to enter into with regard to the climate? You support Mr. President Bolsonaro, who's massacring Amazonia for business and for mining interests. What is the value of your commitment for the right of women when Bolsonaro is every day attacking the rights of women, every day attacking the rights of homosexuals and public freedoms and supporting child labour? Is this the socialist? Is this the policy that you support? The Mercosur agreement is a mismanagement of the climate, a destruction of small farmers in the north and the south. You didn't say a single word about the farming community in what you said. If you wish to defend the European project and if you don't wish to sell this Europe to multinationals and big business and the car industry, and if you're not going to give it away to the far right, to Brazil, then if in this House you wish to do that for the citizens, condemn and stop the Mercosur agreement and revisit the Commission's text on the Common Agricultural Policy, then you will be in line with our values.
Mr. Madison, 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ms. von der Leyen. I have only 1 minute, so I have only a few sentences to say. First thing, of course, we have a lot of emotions here, and that's absolutely understandable, because a lot of us doesn't like the other side, and the other side doesn't like us. That's fine. It's part of democracy. I have met a few times Mr. Timmermans. I know that he was one of the problem in the European Council about the next candidate for the leader of the Commission. But in fact, I know also his positions, his ideas about his political views. If I was listening to Mrs. von der Leyen about the climate policy, about the migration policy, about the federalisation of the European Union, I should like to say that there is no big difference between Mr. Timmermans and Ms. von der Leyen. It's the pragmatic policy. I understand, but it's the fact. I have only 10 seconds left. I would like to say that all the member states in the Schengen area have agreed that we have to protect our external borders, like Italy does now, like Hungary with over €1 billion, even helping Germany with that. And we have to stop the illegal human traffics, because a lot of people here just supporting to give the millions of euros the money for traffickers who are just getting money thanks for this migration. And we are just saying here, oh, that's very fun, we have to open the borders. I don't think it's a very smart way to go forward. But anyway, good luck on the evening, and I really hope that we will have other candidate also. Thank you.
Mr. Epping, 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam President. The first conclusion I draw from this whole sorry affair is that the Spitzenkandidat system has failed. Mr. Weber, sitting over there in his chair, I think he's actually listening to me, should actually have been sitting up where you're sitting, Madam President. A small step for you, but a huge leap for the European Parliament. So you're out of the game, and we have now seen that the whole system has turned into the Bull of the Broken Dreams. So, Ms van der Leyen, let's come back to your promises. You made all sorts of promises to us in our group. You made promises to the Macronists, the Socialists, the Greens and others. And if I look at those promises, they're all quite different. So how is this possible? You are reading out your list like some kind of school marm, but we're all wondering what the value of these promises is. Let's look at the example of the Bundeswehr, the German army. We've all heard about the profound problems plaguing the German army, but you seem to be blaming the German army for this. An attitude problem, you seem to be saying. But I wonder if you haven't got an attitude problem, because as a politician you're responsible for that. And if things were to go wrong in the European Commission, somewhere I myself worked for 7 years, you'll probably blame the European Commission for its attitude problem. So my question to you is, to what extent are you able to look at yourself honestly in the mirror? Thank you.
1 minute.
Colleagues, the vote today is a vote on the climate. We find ourselves in the midst of an acute climate crisis, and the question that we are taking a position on is whether we want to have a climate mitigation policy or not? We've heard the answer from Mrs. von der Leyen today, and the answer that Mrs. von der Leyen gave was a clear no. The answer that she gave was no. 50% reduction of CO2 emissions by 2030 is not going to be sufficient to avoid a climate catastrophe. 55% isn't enough either to avoid a climate catastrophe. We need climate action now. This is why I'll be voting against Mrs. von der Leyen, and I would call on all of you who went to these elections to bring about climate mitigation to do the same. The time is now. The time is now, and we must act. And if you vote no today, you can act. It is time to put actions behind our words. So vote for the climate. Vote to avoid a climate catastrophe, and vote against Mrs. von der Leyen later today in the vote. Thank you very much.
Mr. Sinčić for 1.5 minutes.
Madam von der Leyen, before I begin, I would like to ask you, will the European Union survive the next economic crisis? You represent everything that is wrong in Europe. You represent centralization, the deficit of democracy. You represent the economic hegemony. We are talking about centralization. A few days ago, Italy got its 7th president of the Italian parliament, 7th in a row, and I congratulate Mr. Sassoli. Germany and France have already had 6, whereas 15 peripheral countries, including Croatia, had none. The situation is similar in the Council of Europe and in the Commission. When will somebody else, Malta, Slovakia, Croatia, get its fair share? Never. When it comes to democracy, you come here, you stand before us, and you don't have a legitimacy. Which electoral process did you participate in? How can you have a legitimacy? How do you ask from voters, 200 million of them, your legitimacy? The agreement in Brussels is not democratic. It was agreed behind the closed door, and again, all powerful powers have agreed. The French will get central bank, Belgium the council, and nothing for the periphery. You are speaking about Syria, that you went there, or rather that you received the Syrian boy. Kudos to you. But on the other hand, you are talking about NATO, the constant generator of instability, of an imperialist force that does not serve peace. Croatia does not have any benefit from that, only damage. You can only be honest, or you cannot get my voice, my vote.
For 2 minutes.
Madame la Présidente, Madame von der Leyen.
Madam President, Madam von der Leyen. A French writer said that we have to have the courage to say what you see, but you also have to have the courage to see what you see. We have to recognise the fact that Europe is in profound crisis. There are economic crises, challenges, there are migratory challenges, and the big powers are trying to write world history. These are the challenges of our time, and there is only one way to push back the concern and Euroscepticism that we're seeing, and that's to ensure that Europe works in the service of European people. We can no longer submit to the inequalities of globalization. We've lost our industrial know-how and production. And I'm thinking in particular of our farmers. I regret the fact that we haven't heard more about them this morning. Agriculture is Europe's first policy, and here in the EPP, we will never allow it to be used as an adjustment variable. We have to face the challenges that are creating the environmental crisis. The European Union has to impose a carbon requirement on all countries exporting towards the European Union. We're facing also a migratory crisis. Every death in the Mediterranean is, of course, a tragedy. But each of these tragedies has the same cause, and that's our inability to act. people are taking the risk to come to Europe because the only way they can get here is to come illegally. We finally have to get control of Europe's external borders, and it's humanitarian duty that requires that. We have to act. We have to act to ensure that we find a balance in our societies and to ensure that we can preserve this incredible civilization for future generations. Over the coming 5 years, the European people are counting on us to ensure that we watch what you do with our eyes wide open.
Madame Piri, for 2 minutes. Beste collega's.
Ladies and gentlemen, Ms von der Leyen, turnout for the European elections was the highest we've ever had in the Netherlands. We had a passionate campaign where we tried to convince voters. TV campaigns were organised, bringing together the heads of list. And at the end of the day, the votes was clearly one for optimism, but also to take influence on who the new President of the European Commission would be. It was quite clear that we'd have a large majority in the European Parliament, and this large majority would only support one of the Spitzenkandidaten as nominee for the European Commission presidency, as was the case 5 years ago. Soon after the elections, however, the tombola suddenly started, and the heads of state and government plucked your name out of the hat. There's a widespread rumour in the Netherlands or a question, why did I vote? People feel they've been cheated, and I fully understand that. In the Council, the Spitzenkandidat process was strangled by the autocrat Viktor Orban. The Polish and Hungarian governments viewed your nomination as a political victory for them. You're not to blame for that. But the fact they said that makes it all the more important that you adopt a clear stance on the importance of the rule of law. So I have a clear question for you. Do you support the Article 7 procedures which in recent years the Commission and the Parliament have initiated against the Polish and Hungarian governments? It's important that you dispel any doubt. And clearly there's a long way to go if we are to make Europe more democratic. This will require enormous efforts on your part, but also on ours. Ms von der Leyen, in your address you set out a series of points which I think will appeal to progressive voters. If you are elected today, I believe that you can count on the support of the Party van de Arbeid, the Dutch Labour Party, when it comes to pursuing a green, fairer and more social Europe. Thank you.
Madame Ries, for 1 minute.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Welcome to the European Parliament, Ms von der Leyen. A lot has already been said about migration, climate, rule of law. Let me try and cut a little bit to the chase. Politics is what we're about, but I think what is critical for you and for us is bringing back this link of confidence with us, between us and Europeans. Now, you're not responsible, Ms von der Leyen, and we have to keep remembering this, for the original sin, I would say, these 3 days of imposition of this situation that really raised a lot of hackles, but really now we do need to move towards reform. So let me focus on the 3 essentials. Reform of the Common Agricultural Policy, first of all. You were remarkably discreet about that, and that would be a euphemism. And then the fact that we got this digital lag, robotics, artificial intelligence, etc. What are you proposing that we should do to finally emerge as European champions? And we are severely behind. Then you are a woman and you are a doctor. That's a double first, and I'm delighted, Ms von der Leyen, but we have seen health being the poor relation of the last Commission, and yet the challenges are huge and cross-border, rare diseases, orphan diseases, vax, anti-vax, all of that. What are you going to do? Hopefully you're going to do better in any case, and you will have our support in so doing. Thank you.
For 1 minute, Madam Hautala.
Thank you very much. Madam von der Leyen, I am happy that you say in your political guidelines that trade is not an end in itself. It should deliver prosperity at home and export our values across the world. But we all know that by importing products, we export breaches of human rights, of victims of modern slavery, of indigenous peoples. We cause deforestation by consuming chocolate, textiles and other products. Would you support a mandatory European law on human rights due diligence to European companies so that we can shed light on the unethical aspects of the supply chains? A second question. I come from the northernmost Europe, and I would like to remind you that climate crisis has some of the most dramatic consequences in the very Arctic part of our world and Europe. Your agenda for Europe does not even mention the Arctic. So my question is, will you take Arctic policy as one of your political priorities for the new Commission?
Mr. Berg, 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam President. Ladies and gentlemen, Madam Minister, as a newly elected member of this House, I was somewhat surprised by the procedure for appointing the Commission of the President. I think it's very regrettable that a large chunk of voters in the European Union feel as if their vote's been ignored and that these important decisions are being taken behind closed doors. This doesn't create trust, it creates mistrust. However, I would like to focus on some constructive aspects in my comments. My concerns primarily concern the questions of border control and internal security, in particular the threat facing us from international Islamic terrorism. We have seen in recent years that security challenges have come with the open doors policy pursued by Germany and other European countries, as well as the enormous burden for our policy and forces of law and order who have been under enormous pressure. At the same time, we've seen uncontrolled immigration continue, accompanied by terrorist attacks. Like many other people, my fear is that the real security problems we're faced with are unfortunately likely to grow rather than diminish. So, Ms von der Leyen, when it comes to internal security, can you provide us with the clear guarantee that you're not just banding around empty words? Thank you.
Mrs. Kanko, for 1 minute, please.
Good morning, Mrs. von der Leyen. My name is Asita Kanko, and I am one of the 7 children of a woman who had to run and hide when she decided to divorce, chased by religious and traditional interdictions. When my last sibling was born, she was 37. I turned 39 last Sunday, and I have only 1 kid, by choice. But also because, like millions of female genitally mutilated women, giving birth is more complicated. I'm one of them. And I'm grateful for this freedom to stand here and talk to you. I'm asking you this question as a Fleming, as a woman, as a little girl who did not escape FGM, and as a concerned mother. In Europe, we close our eyes when the Islamic State kidnapped and raped women and girls like Nobel Prize winner Nadia Murad. We look away when girls are cut on European soil. 500,000 is the number of those who live today with the consequences of FGM inside the EU. We look away when there are honor crimes, Sharia courts, segregation and Islamic radicalization, which is bad news for women and our European values. How are you going to use your position to protect all women, regardless of their religion and tradition? Article 1 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights did not start for them yet. You can do this inside a strong Europe, not a super state of the top jobs, but one about the people and who adds value and respect subsidiarity. Thank you.
Madam Aubrey, for 1 minute.
Madam von der Leyen, what would you say to the over 100 million European citizens who didn't vote for you? What legitimacy do you have in dealing with the crises of the climate and inequality? Are you going to continue to say that the coffers are empty, like your predecessor said, for There is money, however, for the crisis, for the ecological transition. We have this check over €1 billion that the European Union writes every year to tax avoiders, to Google, to Amazon, a check that all European citizens are paying the price for. This is a paradise for the rich, not the poor, and you're the president of this rich people's paradise. We have to move to action. We have to put an end to European tax havens, such as Luxembourg or Malta. You're their candidate, Madam von der Leyen. You're not ours, and you're not the candidate of the European people. None of the rich people are frightened of you, but none of the people believe in you. You don't have any answer to the anger of the people. Look at this check. We want to rip up this check. We'd rather rip this check from the tax evaders than to vote for you.
For 1.5 minutes, Mr. Nikolaou Alavanos.
Η ανάδειξη του Προέδρου στην Κομισιόν είναι αποτέλεσμα ενός σκληρού παζαρισμού.
This procedure to elect the President of the European Commission has been the result of horse trading. And it is the case that the new Commission will continue down the same road in policy terms as the old one. Limits applied to democracy, anti-communism, no workers' rights across member states, militarism, rearmaments and problems for sovereignty. People won't be able to exercise their full rights in the economic zone of Cyprus, for example. In Greece, with the Tsipras government and the programme through to 2024, we've seen all of these problems at first hand. 3.5% is the figure that was required by way of a surplus, and the new measures are going to weigh very heavily upon the backs of the Greek people. And all of these points form the basis of the policy of new democracy, which has recently been elected and which is going to bring about a return to austerity and a further commercialization of rates for institutions which have to abide by the requirements and the strictures. And this is going to cause problems for the future.
Thank you, Madam President. You talked about policies for the future of Europe, and your policy proposal is something which to a great extent we can support. If we want to fight unemployment, we have to have economic policies which focus above all on the needs of the real economy. We need an industrial policy at the European level, together with objectives such as 20% of GDP coming from manufacturing and agriculture. When you become the President of the Commission, I would like to ensure that the DG GROW fully implement the Small Business Act so as to enable us to better defend our industry from the assault of Chinese industrialists. We also have to ensure that we roll out robust anti-dumping standards. We also have to defend ourselves from the web giants. They have to pay taxes like everybody else. Above all, however, we have to consolidate the CAP. Cuts to the CAP would be a massive mistake. We can't hide the fact that industry and agriculture are two fundamental instruments which we have to create jobs around European regions. Of course, we have to improve access to credit. We have to move towards the European Banking Union while developing a European capital market. When it comes to immigration, I would like to suggest to you that you give careful thought to something the European Parliament voted for, which is more money for the Africa plan. We need 50 or 60 billion. In 2050, there will be 2.5 billion people on the African continent. If today Frontex isn't enough. That demonstrates that we need a strategy to enable us to make Africa a better place. We have to help fight terrorism, improve farming, fight disease and so on. Otherwise we'll be faced with an invasion of millions of people rather than just thousands. So the next European Commission really has got its work cut out there. I'd like to wind up on the rule of law. You said some things which I fully agree with. However, I would just like to remind you that we're 21 months down the road from the assassination of Daphne Caruana, a journalist in Malta, and we still don't know who ordered that assassination. We have to defend the rule of law. We have to defend freedom of speech, including in countries outside the European Union. Venezuela, for example, where millions of citizens of European, German, Spanish, Italian origin are continuing to suffer at the hands of a cruel dictatorship. I would insist that the European Commission follow the example of the European Parliament, and that we continue to move forward in this direction.
For 1.5 minutes, Mr. Geer.
Frau Präsidentin. Thank you very much, Madam President. Mrs. von der Leyen, I haven't come here to acknowledge the fact that you took on board many of our demands in your letter, many points that formed part of our electoral campaign as Social Democrats, which you've taken on board too. For instance, looking at unemployment security, unemployment insurance, making sure that we fight that particular issue. I welcome that. Of course, when it comes to the Member States, I would like to see what happens next. What will Member States do with your commitment, with what you've said? What will happen in terms of how they handle this particular issue? So you've made an announcement, but I must admit I'm a little bit sceptical. I mean, it's fine to show confidence, show trust in advance, but there are institutional arguments that would militate against that. In terms of the electoral campaign, I, of course, fought for Frans Timmermans, who was our Spitzenkandidat for our political family, and therefore I thought it was important to recognise that rather than nationality. And I spoke to all our voters, and I'm sure all of our S&D and SPD members did the same. We said that we would only be electing a Spitzenkandidat, and I intend to do that, and the 16 of us intend to do that. So this Spitzenkandidat process, we thought it was a great victory for European democracy. We praised it. I unfortunately take note of the fact that today we have gone against that. So my question to you, Madam, how are you going to make sure that we get guarantees from the European Council to make sure that that kind of thing does not happen?
For 1 minute, Madam Chair.
Thank you. It is a great honour and a great responsibility for me to stand here in the heart of European democracy and deliver not only my first comments, but the first comments made by my party in any parliament. I am a new MEP from Hungary, a wonderful country many of you only hear about when there is a new attack on the rule of law or on civil society. And I know that many of you are fed up with it. As a Hungarian, I am also fed up. Because until now, the European elite has turned a blind eye and appeased populists like Viktor Orban. And this has to change now. We must fight back against those who seek to destroy our union and ensure it remains a community of values. We must keep Europe united, prosperous and secure. And for that, we need leadership that is not afraid to defend European democracy. And we expect actions, not words. The next Commission must provide specific safeguards for protecting the rule of law and leaders with the political will and ability to implement them. Because today, standing for Europe is often seen as standing for the status quo, but the status quo is not good enough. We need real change.
Madam Vanna, for 1 minute.
Frau Ministerin. Minister van der Leyen, you talked much about peace in Europe today. I come from a neutral country, from Austria, and as a Green and as someone fighting for a union of peace, then I am, when it comes to the defence and European army and European defence union and the way you call it, I'm very critical of all of that. A majority of EU citizens does not see defence as a priority. They see health, environmental issues, education and so on as the priorities, and that's what this majority of citizens want. and they focus more on diplomacy and humanitarian ways of looking at peace in the world as opposed to military ways. We think that it would be the wrong way to look at defence spending in the EU and to increase that. This money could be used for social and environmental issues because the money is missing for that. We don't need a defence minister in Europe. We need someone who addresses the other issues. And we're just wondering if you, as EU Commission, could be credible when it comes to looking at using less weapons, and you could stand up for environmental and social issues and to control the weapons industry.
Mr. Fest, 1 minute.
Ja, vielen Dank, Frau.
Thank you very much, Madam Minister, and thank you also for your address to the House. I think the previous speaker just now will have pointed out to us that you are the wrong person for this position. And what we've heard so far is a document which is opportunism, laughably so. It's quite obviously, I mean, everything was in there. Minimum wage, gender equality, sustainable Europe, the empowerment of children, Me Too, SMEs, fair taxes, all of that was in there. And I don't know, your political approach seems to be to really look at trivial matters on the left and on the green side. What about yourself? What about your position, your functions? In your statement, you know, in content terms, there was nothing, I believe, that actually something that we could hang on to. I think that as far as you're concerned, all you're really concerned about is getting this new post, this new job, a trophy, if you like, a political trophy, and to be entitled to a new official vehicle. So my question to you is, what do you actually want to achieve here? I'm afraid your statement leads me to the conclusion that this woman should not be the future President of the Commission. Thank you.
Mr. Turch, 1 minute.
Sí, muchas gracias. Thank you very much. Ms von der Leyen, we're very concerned to note that there's virtually no difference between Timmermans and yourself. You're trying to keep the left happy, to keep the liberals happy, to keep the socialists happy. You wrote to them to explain what your project was, but you didn't turn to the other side. And this is where we're seeing very serious events right now. What you have done is put a wedge between yourself and many European citizens. Some don't like some of the election results across Europe, and then they turn their back on those people. That is very serious. There are people who have different economic policies, different opinions, and that may not be in line with the majority consensus here that Timmermans and yourself are virtually identical mouthpieces for. You have said that you will always stand against those who are against unity, but I do not think there is anything worse for unity in the European Union and unity in the European Parliament than for people to drive a wedge between themselves and groups, which flies in the face of a rules-based system or establishing a common project.
Mr. Kiriakou for 1 minute.
Chair, many of us thought that Brexit is a lesson and an opportunity for European political elite, a signal that a change of course is necessary. EU citizens are rightly discontent with the undemocratic and intransparent decision-making in this House and in other EU institutions. Madam von der Leyen, your reference to strengthening of the Spitzenkandidat system was somewhat ironic, if not cynical. This is the system that was ditched in order to nominate you here. Spitzenkandidat system is far from being perfect, but it was a step in the right direction to select a nominee to head the European Commission. Your nomination just shows that the leaders of the EU ignore the voice of the European electorate and don't learn from their earlier mistakes. Such decisions and ignorance fuel Euroscepticism and criticism, so beware and don't be surprised. This is disappointment for those who wish to see a stronger, a more credible, a more democratic and a more transparent EU. Ms von der Leyen, it is not your fault, but you have greatly contributed to this disappointment, and this is why many people in this chamber find your nomination unacceptable. Thank you.
Mr. Rangel, 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like to start by congratulating Ms von der Leyen for her inspiring and inspired speech, full of conviction and full of ambition for Europe. You can certainly count on our support. I wanted to make 2 further points. I think it's rather a shame that since you're a physician yourself and you have a concern about health, the EPP master plan to combat cancer is not something which you have stressed. It was a long battle within our group, and we very much hope that the European Commission will take that initiative forward. My other point is a question, a vital question that no one else has raised. There's just one sentence in your speech about the multi-annual financial framework for the 2021-2027 period. There's a passing reference to it. But when we look at cohesion policy, the proposal made by the Commission is unfair. If you look at Italy, in the middle of Europe, 6% of cohesion. Croatia, 16%. Finland, way above the EU average, 5%. Lithuania, 23%. We're comparing neighbouring countries. The cohesion strategy in the Commission proposal is unfair, and the reason for that was that 5% was taken out of the cohesion policy budget for no reason. The ERDF, Social Fund, Cohesion Fund, causing the poorest countries to suffer. There are many priorities for the EU, I agree, but Ms von der Leyen, convergence and cohesion is absolutely vital to achieving unity. So if there is not a revision of the MFF along the lines of what the European Parliament approved, there will be problems of cohesion, there will be problems of unity, there will be differences between member states.
Madame Guillaume, 1 minute.
Madame von der Leyen, vous avez des...
Mrs von der Leyen, you have not performed well. You ticked lots of boxes, but you didn't tick all of them. And we are not clear on many points. What about agriculture? You avoided using any figures. And you're here today because you've gone through a specific process, and it was one very disputed, and it was an agreement between the member states, and actually there's not many of them here today to really support you. The Council did not bear in mind the message from the citizens and the Spitzenkandidat process and the political will there, and I would like to say that the Council was marginalising the role of the European Parliament and turning it into a junior partner. This is one example I can give you here of this. When it comes to migration and asylum, it's not enough just to hear you say that you want to have a reform for the X number of time, because these things are just going to be reformed and reformed until they are in a deadlock. We are talking about major operations in the Mediterranean Sea, and we need to protect the dignity of the European Union. This is the point of it here. You were talking about changing the direction of Europe. That is the point here.
Grazie.
Thank you. Mr. Federley, 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Madam von der Leyen, I must say a few sincere words. I was rather critical to your nomination. I was rather critical to your to you becoming the head of the Commission. Then again, the process we had actually made me feel respected as a member of the European Parliament, as representative of my Swedish voters. For that, I condole you. But also the respect that you showed our group, the Renew Group, the group that grew most in the European Parliament and that defeated populists all through Europe. Thank you for that respect. And that is also why you will have my vote today, because you showed a sincere interest in what the Parliament do think. And remembering what was the procedure 5 years ago, I don't think many colleagues in here felt that we had a proper intervention with Commissioner President Juncker. We had proper interventions with you, and you did listen to that. For that, I respect you. But we will also hold you responsible on your mechanism on an initiative. For example, animal welfare frame law has been asked for by this Parliament by a majority of about 80% of the members for 5 years. Nothing has happened so far. We will come back as soon as you have your college in place, and we will recall that request, and we will hold you accountable to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms Scott Cato, 1 minute.
Thank you, President. Those wanting to stop the UK's disastrous crash out of the EU should feel greatly encouraged by Dr von Leyen's comments about Brexit. I was delighted to hear you call yourself a Remainer to our group and to say that you would be willing to give us the extra time we may need to resolve this deeply damaging episode in our country's history. But on a range of issues, from tax and trade to climate and protecting life in our countryside, there is a gulf between your views and the Green Agenda for Change. Most importantly, I cannot vote for you because the appointments process that led us here is a step away from closer engagement with citizens and from democracy. The backroom deal done in the Council explicitly reassured the far right in the countries of Central Europe, where the rule of law is under threat and democratic standards are at risk. It's so disappointing that the election of the Commission President will depend on the votes of the far right, rather than those of a strong, pro-European majority that could have been achieved by offering the radical change that Green voters demand.
Anderson, 1 minuto. Ms Anderson, 1 minute.
Onorevole Anderson?
Ms Anderson?
Non c'è.
Not present.
Good morning. Frau Bundesministerin.
Madam Federal Minister, I shall be brief. You are the wrong person for the job, regardless of what job you're applying for. You have taken initiatives as a minister that were completely inappropriate. For instance, the advertising agency and the money spent on that. And that was with a view to persuading the German public. As a defence minister, you're also leaving behind demoralised soldiers. Also, our capacity for defence is very much damaged. Instead of that, you have, of course, provided creche opportunities for staff, but that has actually been a joke. You have turned our army into a kind of creche itself. Now, obviously, formally, I should wish you the best of luck in your election. I perhaps could do so with a hope that you will use your position in order to destroy all of this. I understand from your statement that you want to, of course, be held in high regard. Now, I, myself, for many, many years, have been a voter, previously of the CDU, and I'd really rather do anything than actually elect you for this party. Thank you.
Onorevole Van Orden.
Mr Van Orden, 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr President. Dr von der Leyen, I'm greatly disturbed by your attachment to the political project of a European army and European strategic autonomy. This will inevitably lead to a transatlantic divide and undermine NATO. It can only encourage our enemies. But let me focus on our most critical issue as far as the UK is concerned. We welcome your statement of respect for the decision of the British people to leave the European Union and of the need to work closely with Britain in the future. Goodwill on the part of Brussels has so far been rather missing. But we're disappointed that all you seem to offer is extension of our withdrawal date. This is hardly ambitious. Instead, may we suggest you use your influence before you take office to urge amendment or reinterpretation of those aspects of the withdrawal agreement that are clearly unacceptable to the UK. This wouldn't take a lot. Solutions are there. In Europe, as they say, nothing is possible and everything is possible. Britain will leave the European Union on the 31st of October. Let's ensure this is on good terms, without acrimony, to provide the basis for a strong positive relationship in the future, fully respectful of the expressed desire of the British people for control of their own borders and their own laws. Thank you.
Thank you. It's Mr. Kolokusic. 1 minute.
Thank you very much. The basis for development and advancement, as well as the future of the EU, is equality and the rule of law. Equality and the rule of law primarily present themselves in the way the democratic representatives are elected. Out of 130 representatives in the European Parliament, 20 presidential and vice presidential posts went to Germany and 0 to Croatia and Slovenia. That is 0%. Furthermore, the rules of procedure of the Parliament require that these posts be distributed based on a geographic criterion. So therefore, not only the rule of law has been violated, and this is inadmissible. So we have Germany, which has 20 representatives, which is contrary to equality and is actually supremacy in action. So in addition to this, we should elect the President of the Commission who comes from Germany. This is absolutely unacceptable, because this is not Europe of equality, and this is a Europe which will bring the European project into question.
2 minuti, prego.
Mr. Lange, 2 minutes.
Ja, dank u wel, meneer de voorzitter.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, the elections in the Netherlands showed very quickly that you're going to have to be constructive if you want to keep Europe working, because, Madam Candidate, you've already heard, some people say your plans are too much, others say they're not enough. And so maybe that is a sign here that you're finding a good balance. We've talked a lot about your presentations and how you were proposed, but colleagues, this Parliament must look at itself very critically. The candidate talked about the importance of unity, and it's that unity which is what we did not see in the Parliament. Do you think that the candidates, that the Spitzenkandidat from the biggest political party, can be pushed through, and then you would hope then that the second Spitzenkandidat would get through? Well, that's very, very naive if you believe that, because those people really, well, there was nothing to do with transparency here, or a strong Europe, or a strong Parliament. They were just jumping on the horse and running away with it. Macron and Orban, well, that's a strange combination, and they were in the lead. So I'm pleased with what we're hearing from the candidate. She wants to try to look at the damage caused by the Council and trying to limit that in 2024.
Started her speech by mentioning Simone Weil, who wasn't only president of this House, but who was also one of the first female members, or the few, unfortunately, female members of the Académie Française. And when she became member of the Académie Française, she received a sword. And in this sword, she made sure there were 3 engravings: 7, 8, 5, 6, 1. Her number in Auschwitz, remembering us every day why we have this Europe and why we should fight for it every day. The motto of the French Republic and the motto of Europe: unity in diversity. And the choice we have ahead of us tonight, dear colleagues, those who are responsible, those who are constructive, is: are we going to be guided in our vote by frustration and anger about a Council backroom deal, or in the spirit of Simone Weil, will we build together with this candidate the Europe that our citizens need? Thank you very much.
Grazie.
Thank you. Ms. Bonafé, 1 minute. Thank you, President. I'd like to take us back for a moment to the European elections of May last. Nationalists were saying that Europe was failing and they would help bring it down. They haven't yet succeeded. The citizens of Europe still want to believe in Europe. And for that reason, Ms von der Leyen, we call on you to live up to their expectations, breathe new life into Europe, bring innovation. You'll be the first woman at the head of such a prestigious organisation and we want a solid Europe of solidarity. We can't look back. We need to take courage in our hands and use the flexibility of the Stability Pact for growth and jobs so that finally we can move towards a new model for development that will unambiguously put the environment on the table, not as a limitation, which unfortunately we've seen too often here, but as an opportunity. It won't be holding us back. It will be breathing new life into growth because we'll have sustainable growth, and in that way you could live up to the words that you have shared with us this morning. We don't want to turn a blind eye to the excesses of nationalism. We don't want walls, we want responsibility sharing. You talk about economic governance and migration. We've done that when we changed the Dublin system here. It's only with such a vision and such action from the future Commission that will be acceptable to us. Thank you very much. Ms. Karan-Sova, 1 minute.
Madam President-designate, 15 years ago, Central Europeans gave trust to the European project, and now that trust is eroding. Many proposals in the past created an East-West divide on many issues, single market issues, dual quality of products, posting of workers, to the issues of how to make Europe more secure. It is extremely important that the new Commission adopt a different, new approach. The EU must work to rebuild the trust the people has lost, to ensure that we listen to each other before any proposal is made, to continue to abolish the existing barriers in the internal market and not to create new ones, to treat all EU citizens equally with equal access to work and study anywhere in Europe. So, Madam President-designate, I hope you can pledge today to be the voice of all EU citizens. Thank you.
Grazie. Thank you. Mr. Urtasun, 1 minute.
Madam Minister, good morning. Your candidacy is basically a renouncement. We are giving up on the parliamentarisation of our common life here. We're also giving up on a strong defence of the rule of law. We mustn't forget that you're here because Mr. Timmermans was actually vetoed by a number of countries because he was brave on these issues. It's also giving up on our, climate policies. You know that there are changes and that there are many limitations to that. And your Commission will start, unfortunately, with an original sin which I think has been with us all along. Particularly, of course, we've got the question of the votes of the extreme right. We shall see what happens with those votes. But what about the cordon sanitaire that we're trying to establish here in this House? For all these reasons, I'm afraid, Madam Minister, I will not be able to support your nomination. I think Parliament should reject it. And I would also like to say to those who are saying that for the sake of Europe and Europeanism, we should actually defend your candidacy. Well, I think it's important to make sure that the European Parliament does not just yield to the poor decisions and poor decision-making of Council. So therefore, for democratic reasons, for institutional reasons and for European reasons, I think we should dismiss your candidacy. Thank you.
Grazie, onorevole.
Thank you. Mr. Krah, 1 minute.
Designate President, ladies and gentlemen, what we're seeing here is a lesson on how not to do things. We've had to listen to a lot because of our scepticism when it comes to promises for democracy and promises for Spitzenkandidates here and in Brussels. But if you choose her, you'll go much further beyond that scepticism. Mr. Weber, you ran as the Spitzenkandidat, and you were congratulating her and calling for us to support her. And I'm just wondering about how you feel yourself. Anyone who has worked with her or known about her knows that she has failed as defence minister in Germany. She has turned the German army into one where the planes can't fly and the tanks can't drive and the guns don't shoot. And so that is her responsibility. And so if you're going to be voting for her, well, I would be saying that you would be bringing so much explosive into the Commission, and she has failed so badly in Germany.
Thank you. Ms. Tomasic, 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mrs. von der Leyen, we have heard a very ambitious plan on your part, but we haven't heard much about implementation. For a moment there, I thought I was back in my childhood. I grew up in social Yugoslavia, and I had a lot of opportunity to hear grand ideas that were quite similar to yours. Fraternity and equality, political integration, common army, greater workers and women's rights. We know how that story ended. Your vision will meet the same end because the citizens do not want that. If they wanted it, you wouldn't have to fret today if you are going to get a majority in this House. You speak of equality and common efforts in Europe, but you keep forgetting that all leading EU posts went to old member states. And on top of everything, you are suggesting the system of outvoting when it comes to common foreign and security policy. So much about equality. In your speech, you spoke about the foundations of Europe in Greek philosophy and the Roman law. But as a Christian Democrat, you didn't speak about Christianity. Your Europe is fleeing its roots, and this is why it is now so divided.
Mr. Giarrusso, 1 minute. Ms. von der Leyen, we can't put blind faith in someone. We have concerns about your political action. You've been talking about fairness, environment, women, workers. We've heard about a minimum wage, saving human lives. Yes, the EU has responsibilities in these areas and others, and it can't put all the burden of immigration on one member state. The EU needs to go back to what it was at the time of the founders. Growth for the whole of Europe. That's not what's happening. Youth unemployment is very high in Italy now. It's very hard for young people to settle down and have families. So, Ms. von der Leyen, we would like to see a safe EU for all, for farmers, fishermen, entrepreneurs, young people. We want the same opportunities for development for all. So we call on you to enter into a serious commitment to do away with the scandal of tax havens, to harmonise tax legislation applying to businesses, and have a very severe anti-mafia policy. If you can turn words into deeds, you can count on loyal support from us. But if it remains words, then Europe will still be putting the main burden on places like the south of Italy, and we will then be coming down on you like a ton of bricks.
Prego, 2 minuti.
Thank you, Mr. Toubé, 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, President. Mrs. von der Leyen, I very much hope that everyone today who believes in European cooperation, I hope that everyone will actually give you their support today. The extreme left and the extreme right would appear to be voting against you today, but I think that actually you should see that as a sort of sign of honour for you. It's a tribute to you in a way. In addition to that, it would appear that the Greens are siding with those ranks. I must say I'm surprised by that, and I also must say that I think we're a little bit ashamed the fact that you'll be voting against the very first woman who might become President of the European Commission, and in addition to that, someone who can actually garner a majority in favour of a progressive climate policy for Europe. I mean, there's a lot of cooperation that we need to get on with in Europe for the climate, of course, but also we need to fight cross-border crime. We also need to look at freedom of movement in Europe. That is something that goes without saying for us, but that kind of freedom of movement should not apply to terrorists or to criminals. And from that point of view, we need to shore up our police cooperation, I would argue. There's also the immigration policy. We need to look at that as a central key issue. We need to have the right majorities in order to make sure that we have greater legal certainty and alongside that a better control for our immigration policy. I'm convinced that this European Parliament will be able to get this majority in order to support an immigration policy that is led both by the heart and by the head. And finally, if I may, Europe for me is all about freedom, it's all about entrepreneurship, it's all about making sure that we increase security and safety for all of our residents. You will have our support today, Madam, and we also have great expectations. I must point that out to you. The European Parliament will be ready to cooperate with you in order to tackle the key problems that Europe faces. We need to do that today. Thank you.
Ms. Kaljurand, 1 minute.
Madam von der Leyen, first of all, I would like to thank you for today's remarks and for the letter you addressed to the S&D group. It was well received and it added a lot to the discussion we had last week in Brussels. I would also like to recognise your commitment to democracy, rule of law, human rights, fair and equal Europe, Europe without dividing lines. Now I'm looking forward to concrete actions and to concrete answers to the questions that were raised by my colleagues. Also, I would like to draw your attention to another dividing line that you did not address today.
It's a division between East and West, exemplified by the latest decision from the European Council, in which all of the important positions were given to Western European countries. I do not want to have a Europe that falls into an East and a West, new and old member states, states with more votes and states with fewer votes. We cannot build Europe in this way. That's why I ask you, how do you assess this decision, and what are you going to do in order to not have this division become even deeper?
Mr. Guinea, 1 minute.
Domnule președinte, doamnă von der Leyen.
Thank you, Chairman. Ms. von der Leyen.
It's okay now? Vreau să insist pe două lucruri importante pentru.
So I wanted to stress one point that's very important for the Romanian delegation. This is economic integration and fiscal integration. And this covers Eurozone members and all countries that want to join the Eurozone, like Romania. We need support so that the support mechanism, the technical support mechanism for joining the Euro works. And Mr. Juncker mentioned this several times. And I welcome the attention that you gave to launching a pan-European mechanism for the rule of law. That was something that was very important for the Renew group. And I would say again that the European Parliament adopted this principle for this mechanism 2 years ago, and we would like to see the necessary legislation launched so that it can be used in the European Parliament.
Mr. Smith, 1 minute.
Thank you, President. Good morning, colleagues. We've reached the point in the debate where everything has been said, but it has not yet been said by everybody. But Mrs von der Leyen, I would like to congratulate you on what I thought was an impressive speech this morning. You've come a long way in your presentation with the House and your interaction with the groups here. I was particularly struck by your commitment to a gender-balanced College of Commissioners. That will shake things up in itself. The Scottish Government has been gender-balanced for 5 years now. I commend our experience to you. Congratulations. And on Brexit, you're aware Scotland has a particular perspective on this matter, but you should also be aware that there's colleagues from across the House, in England, in Wales, in Northern Ireland and elsewhere, working hard to bring some sense to Brexit. We are united in the fact that the best Brexit is no Brexit. There are members of this House who will make noise. Some of us are here to find solutions, and I'm very glad that you will be an ally in keeping the door open for us. You're also very welcome to this House, but to add another thing to your in tray, this House is not complete. We are missing 3 members from Catalonia, not least our group colleague Oriol Junqueras. The only solution to this intractable problem will be dialogue, and you, personally, are in a position to be an honest broker in that discussion. I hope you will play that role. Thank you.
Grazie. Thank you. Mr. Koos, 1 minute.
Onorevole Koos.
Mr. Koos.
Thank you very much, President. Madam Minister, 14 years ago, you were appointed Minister for Family Affairs, and at the time, my wife and I were delighted. because we knew that you have 7 children yourself, you come from a big family yourself, and we were expecting our 10th child at that moment in time. And we expected you to conduct good policy in favour of the family, to support families, but we were very disappointed in the event. I look at your address to the House today. I understand you want to build a form of Europe that is premised upon Greek philosophy and Roman law. And there's something missing there, it seems to me. What I'm missing is the Christian premise for all this, the Christian roots of Europe, because without that, it simply cannot work. It will collapse. And therefore, what you're trying to build here is another Babel's Tower, I'm afraid. That's what I fear. Or, alternatively, this will be a sort of house that will collapse because it is on such rocky foundations. I wish you could avoid that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Yaki, 1 minute.
Thank you, President. Madam Minister, European Union has launched the humiliating procedure under Article 7 towards Poland. Someone has decided that it is lawful when, for instance, judges accept the robbery of properties for 115-year-old people. And the other side, it is unlawful when we restore people's influence on the justice system. For example, we are implementing random assignment of matters in court. Every time when I'm being asking, show me at least one example, no 8, no 10, one example of the solution that we implement in Poland and which is not exist in another EU country, there is always the same answer: silence. Silence. Madam Minister, that's why I'm asking. Are you going to end this ridiculous political action with Article 7? Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Switza.
Thank you. Mrs. von der Leyen, I would like to thank you for your introductory remarks. I would like to remind everybody once again that we had the Spitzenkandidaten process, that we had our Spitzenkandidat, Mr. Weber. Unfortunately, to some who wanted to show that they are great Democrats, this process failed, and here you are as a candidate for the post of the President of the European Commission. I have to say that I am glad that although the process of Spitzenkandidaten was not successful, that we do have a candidate from the EPP family who was relative winner of the European elections. The second reason why I am happy that you're here today is the fact that you're a woman, and I'm very happy to hear what your approach to gender equality is. I was happy to hear how you are going to treat the half of the European and the world population, and I really like your approach. What I didn't really hear in your speech, and I would like to hear your opinion on that, is the following. I know that you have very good relations with our Minister of Defense. I actually come from a rather new EU member states, and I didn't really hear much about the differences that currently exist between old and new member states, Schengen countries and non-Schengen countries. I think it is important that the Schengen zone be extended. Croatia is one of the candidates, and I hope you will be working on that. Also, I would like to hear more about your approach and your opinion on the enlargement of the European Union by including the Western Balkan countries. I am very happy to hear your opinion about the economy. The people are not here to serve the economy, but it's the other way around. We cannot actually spend more than we earn. First we have to earn, and then we have to allocate it in a fair manner, and I'm happy to hear that. Your Green Deal is to be welcomed. Regardless of whether or not the Green will vote for you, your Green Deal is extremely important because of sustainability and the future of our children, and I'm glad that this is a part of your portfolio. When it comes to the migrations. I hope you will continue working on the implementation of the plan for Africa. Mr. Weber, if I'm not mistaken, had a commissioner for Africa in his election program. I believe that we have to continue working on the cooperation with Africa, but protecting Europe at the same time. So in this sense, I would like to give you my support once again, and I would like to ask my colleagues in this House to remember why we are all here united, and this is peace, prosperity and integration. Thank you.
Thank you, President. Ms. von der Leyen, welcome to the House of the Citizens of Europe. You were not Spitzencandidate, and you're not a socialist yet. We'll see by the end of your term of office. You know that you needed or need socialists to become president. It looks as though you're willing to enter into certain commitments. You sent them to our group yesterday, and you've reiterated them this morning here in the plenary. So there will be a socialist stamp on your presidency. There'll be greater social justice, a European minimum wage, European unemployment insurance, a child and youth guarantee EU-wide. We also appreciate your gender equality strategy. If the gender pay gap can be eliminated and women can be protected against gender-based violence, then it may be possible to achieve true equality in the future, which you've committed to in your College of Commissioners. Ms. von der Leyen, if you are appointed, we will work together to ensure that you meet those commitments with directives, regulations, instruments and financial resources which will allow those aims to be achieved. We'll be delighted to work with the first female president of the European Commission if you are elected. Good luck.
Thank you. Ms. Katainen, please stick to time. 1 minute.
Thank you, President. Madam von der Leyen, in your program you have prioritized climate matters, and in this discussion as well, you have been, or people have been demanding for concrete measures and actions and solutions, and that is why I would also like to focus on climate and forest issues in particular, because they are closely interlinked. It is very important that you strive towards carbon-free Europe and intend to achieve the goals of the energy and climate strategy. In the Commission's 2050 vision, bioeconomy and wood-based products play a huge role in giving up the fossil economy. It is crucial that the ability of forests to sequester carbon is looked after, and that is implemented through active and sustainable forest management and forestry industry, and not by limiting the use of wood. So I would like to hear how you will make sure that in a Europe of growing forest resources, the use of wood is seen as a solution and not as a problem in combating climate change. What are your views on this very concrete matter?
Grazie, onorevole Colà.
Thank you, Member Kolaja. 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dear Madam von der Leyen, at the last public consultation, the majority of stakeholders and citizens rejected the reopening of the liability regime of the directive on electronic commerce. As you are well aware, imposing liability on online content service providers and mandatory filtering of content was part of the controversial issues during the last copyright reform. Over 250,000 people in Germany only protested against the devastating Article 13, now numbered 17, of the Copyright Directive and against the introduction of upload filters. More than 5 million signed a petition, the biggest in the European history. In contrast with all that, in your agenda for Europe, you seem to support the reopening of the e-commerce directive and, quote unquote, upgrading the liability and safety rules. Dear Madam von der Leyen, Could you please elaborate on what that upgrade means and confirm that the principle of safe harbour for hosting service providers stays intact, as well as that no mandatory filters will be proposed? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Beck. 1 minute. Thank you, Chairman. Ms. Minister, the Eurozone with Japan has the lowest growth rates and the highest taxes in the developed world. An EU CO2 tax requires unanimity. Madam Minister, you are therefore raising the point about unanimity at EU level when it comes to taxes and calling it into question. Your ministry has spent billions on external consultancy, and primarily it went to McKinsey. Around a third of the military resources are ready for use. A journalist wrote saying McKinsey is using the defence ministry like a cash machine, and it says that the army is not working well, the consultancy gets paid and the taxpayer pays. Colleagues, do we really want to have an EU consultancy tax in the future? And this is something that we would be looking at implementing when it comes to across the EU for the EU policies for the environment. And that is not what we want. Thank you, Mr. Vondra.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Secretary. Just listening to you last week in our group, there was a sign of promise and hope for me, but reading your letters yesterday and your speech today, I have to admit that I am more and more disappointed. You gave up totally to the progressive and the green agenda, and it's particularly clear in the climate change policy when you gave up to 95% of the Green Party demands, and they want the remaining 5%, and maybe you will even incline to do it. I guess that instead of adapting ourselves to the climate change, you agreed with these unrealistic goals in 2030, and the vision of non-carbon society, for me coming from Czechoslovakia, reminds me of a promise of non-class society, you know, that's against the nature. And 30 years ago, I remember in China, everybody was driving a bicycle, where every family in Europe has a car. Do you believe that in 2030, the vision of Europe is that a couple of billionaires would be driving a battery-charged Maybachs, and the rest, she or her, will drive their bicycles, and the Chinese, everybody would have a car? This is your vision of Europe being competitive with China in the future?
Thank you. Mr. Sean Kelly, 2 minutes.
Ursula,
thank you, Chair. I would like to welcome Ms von der Leyen, and I hope she does well.
A little over 2 weeks ago, your performance since, and especially here today, has been truly remarkable. You've shown that you're a woman of great talent, confidence, perspective, calmness, and well equipped to do the job of Commission President, which I hope you will get this evening by at least 400+ votes. You mentioned many areas of great importance. The one that mattered most in the European elections was climate change, and I welcome your practical approach to that. And one thing I would ask you is to ensure that as we move to a low carbon economy, that nobody is left behind. We have to have a just transition for all. The tough cutter from Ireland, the steel worker from Germany, the dairy farmer from Italy, the coal miner from Poland. Also, Spitzenkandidat has been mentioned. You're in some respects the victim or the beneficiary of it, the way you look at it. would you agree with me that you might set up a working group of nominees from the Council, nominees from the Parliament and the Commission to come forward with proposals on how this can work in the future, and in that way you could rescue the process? I was also very pleased with what you said about Brexit and your consistency in the answers you gave to me at the EPP Group, reiterated here today, in relation to the backstop, the withdrawal agreement and flexibility in regard to an extension if necessary. I would ask you to further underline your support for Ireland in the future, as we had unwavering support from Jean-Claude Juncker, Michel Barnier, etc. Finally, I just want to say to you that your gender equality is something that you are in the ideal position to lead, and we look forward to that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Liberatsky, please. Boguslav, 1 minute.
Thank you very much. Mrs. von der Leyen, on behalf of the Polish Socialists and Democrats, I would like to take this opportunity that you've come across really well in all of our talks, in all of our meetings. You've said a number of interesting things. I am particularly pleased to hear what you have to say about the rule of law and your commitment to that issue. No compromises. The environment, safe food, healthy food and unpolluted air. Now, of course, we need to have fair distribution of the burden in all these regards, a fair share. You've spoken about cohesion policy. You've indicated that you wish to strengthen our cohesion policy. You've also talked about the minimum wage. I was really happy to hear about that, and I very much hope that that will be appropriate for member states. This is what we're here for. In terms of our foreign policy and defence policy, you've been perhaps missing an angle towards the east. Russia, Ukraine, there's a bit of a deficit there. And then finally, geographical distribution when it comes to posts held within the European Union. On that point, we've got Germany, France, Italy. They seem to be at the upper ends of the scale, and then Central Europe, Eastern Europe have got nothing. I hope that that will change in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Kuchuk. 1 minute.
Thank you, President. Ms. von der Leyen, the EU needs change. That's the message that citizens sent us. It's very clear that the people of Europe like the EU, but they want to see it change. They want to see effective reforms to bring it closer to them. They want to see more integration. That is vital. But this cannot come at the expense of enlargement. Integrating the region of the Western Balkans is vital. They're not in the EU yet, but they're vital to our security. If we don't have a commissioner for enlargement, we won't have the enlargement. Right now, we don't only have a two-speed Europe, we also have double standards in the sense that food, transport and other standards are different. There's the Schengen area and other controls. What will you do about that? The outgoing Commission entered into lots of commitments but didn't do anything. It's also very important for negotiations to be concluded on the MFF so that we can ensure that it kicks in from the beginning of 2021.
Thank you, Mr. Kubilius. 2 minutes.
Madam von der Leyen, coming from small Lithuania, I'm very happy to support your candidacy. First of all, because thanks personally to you and to the decisions of the German government and NATO, we have Bundeswehr troops stationed in Lithuania as part of NATO forces. Because of that, we are feeling ourselves much more secure. Madam, I am absolutely sure that you will be a highly prudent and very effective Commission President. The EU needs a real leadership. For us, the EU is not only the common market, not only a source of our economic growth and our social welfare, not only our common united instrument to fight climate change. Those benefits which the EU is bringing to all of us are becoming even more important when, on a national level, we are starting to face a stronger challenge of middle income trap and long-term economic stagnation. But besides those benefits, the EU for us is also a basis for our geopolitical security and stability. The EU has a very powerful and unique instrument how to expand the area of security, stability, rule of law and economic growth on the European continent. And this instrument is the EU enlargement policy. We in Lithuania, with the success of our achievements, are the best example of how powerful is this instrument. We are grateful to European solidarity, which we faced back from the beginning of the 1990s. I would like to use this opportunity to urge you, as the new President of the Commission, to lead ambitious policy of further EU enlargement, first towards the countries of the Western Balkans, and later on also towards the countries of the Eastern Partnership, Ukraine, Georgia and Moldova. People of those countries deserve our solidarity, and we deserve a peaceful and stable neighbourhood on the European continent. Successes of Ukraine, Georgia and Moldova can be a very effective example to ordinary Russian people and the most effective assistance instruments for positive transformations in Russia. And I am absolutely sure that the EU, under your leadership, Madam von der Leyen, can deliver such an ambitious agenda. Best success.
Grazie. Onorevole.
Thank you, Mr. Nika. 1 minute.
Domnule președinte, doamna von der Leyen, vreau să vă spun.
Thank you very much, President. Ms. von der Leyen, I appreciated your progressive and pro-European approach in your speech this morning and in the letter that you sent to our group. And as the head of the Romanian delegation in the S&D, I'll vote for you and I'll tell why. I'll do it because of the hope to fight discrimination against Central and Eastern Europe. You're going to fight to avoid applying two different measures. There's the Schengen area. There are citizens in Europe on the left and Romanians on the right who do not have the same rights. And I hope that you will be able to fight against these different standards being applied. So you need to avoid applying different standards when it comes to agriculture as well. You know that farmers in eastern countries have a lot less than farmers in western EU countries, and so I think we need to have more fairness in the EU, and I hope you'll be able to grant the funds needed for regions in energy transition phases and industrial transition phases. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of families and children and mothers who are going to be affected if those transition regions, when it comes to energy and industry, do not have the funding they need, and that's the case today. So I wish you all the success. Thank you.
Dear Ursula von der Leyen, dear colleagues, Europe needs a stronger and more united foreign, security and defence policy. Lack of a common foreign and security policy renders many other nice decisions meaningless. This is an area where also the European Commission needs to show dedication. And it is my hope that the European Commission will be led by a president who is experienced in the area of security and defence, and who has a good understanding of the shortcomings that need to be improved, also in cooperation with NATO. Ursula von der Leyen has contributed to strengthening European defence capabilities and also in the eastern part of the European Union. It is also important that she would become the first woman to hold the office of the President of the European Commission. I will support Mrs von der Leyen today because of her experience in security and defence and because she has an understanding and a vision of what is needed to make Europe stronger. Thank you.
Grazie.
Thank you, Ms. Metsola. 1 minute 30.
Thank you. The Berlin Wall has been down longer than it was ever up. If ever there was a representation of the enduring success of Europe, this is it.
More than personalities, Europe is hope. More than bureaucracy, it is justice. Now, our EU project has inspired people across generations, continents and peoples, but we have to keep working. We are not flawless. Our social economy, our free and open approach to trade has raised people out of poverty, but it's still too hard for too many. We are still too far away. And I want my children's generation to see Europe as the answer as much as it was for my parents. And that is why we cannot be silent when our fundamental freedoms are under threat. We can never accept that journalists like Daphne Caruana Galizia are intimidated and killed 21 months ago today. We must protect the media. We should never let EU citizenship be sold as a commodity. We cannot allow the next generation to have more plastic than fish in their seas. If we cannot find a bold fix for our environment and for our climate now, we never will. Equally, we cannot allow issues like migration to become existential questions that are argued only on short-term lines. We need better border management while remaining fair with those who are in need, firm with those who are not, and strong with those who seek to exploit the vulnerable. Our Europe is built on the certainty of our values, on the rule of law and of our freedoms. Without them, there can be nothing else. And Dr von der Leyen, I welcome your assurances and know that you will find us as constructive partners in standing up for our European way. Thank you.
Grazie. Monsieur Laroutourou,
Thank you, Mr. Laroutourou. 1 minute.
Madame von der Leyen.
Mrs. von der Leyen, you have set an ambitious target for Europe, namely to halve our CO2 emissions by 2030. You are absolutely right. This is a question of life and death. But if we want to win this climate struggle, the key factor will be money. Yes, we need a climate bank. Yes, we need an investment plan. But we actually need to go further than that. We need to have a real climate budget, 100 billion euros every year, 100 billion in order to fund a Marshall Plan for Africa, a real research programme, and to help families and SMEs in Europe through subsidies in order to help them achieve this transition. So how do we find the 100 billion without imposing taxes on ordinary citizens? I think we need to now start fighting against European tax dumping. When I was little, tax on income in Europe was 40%. On average. Today it's 20%, and dividends yet are exploding. It's 20% here, whereas in the United States of America, from Roosevelt to Trump, it's always on average been 38%, because actually Roosevelt created a federal tax at the time. So if we want to win this climate battle and employment battle, Madam, do you agree with me when I say that the next multi-annual financial framework should set aside a climate budget, 100 billion per year, that would be funded through European income tax in order to fight this issue on climate? Can we get that kind of amount, 5%? Do you think that's too much to save the climate? Thank you.
Grazie, onorevole.
Thank you, Ms. Woutmans. 1 minute.
Thank you,
President. Congratulations, Ms. von der Leyen. To be honest, I would say you have done an excellent job today. Many of us were very, very critical. And I was too at the start, but what I heard was a passionate woman with a vision for Europe, who wants to renew Europe, who wants to work with the Parliament, who wants to give us the right of initiative. And of course, Madam von der Leyen, yes, of course, it's important that you're a woman and you're mentioning gender equality, and you want that in a new commission, and you want to fight gender violence. And yes, we always have 3 men in suits, we're used to that. But, Madam, have you convinced us with this genuine migration policy? European Defence Union, I would have been hearing the word European Army. Maybe that'll come later. And Mrs. von der Leyen, I hope that you'll be able to take good hold of the reins, and that you will be able to get Europe through these obstacles, and that you will be able to make us big and strong. I wish you all the best, and you can count on our vote. Thank you. Mr. Moorjan, 1 minute 30.
Thank you very much, Madam
President-designate, dear colleagues, much was said. I will focus on three things. Firstly, Mrs von der Leyen, I would like to congratulate you for striking the right balance on climate change, on energy policy and on protecting the environment. We have to do more in this area. We have to improve our energy efficiency. We have to reduce CO2 emissions, and we have to do it in a responsible way by measuring the economic, the social, the environmental impact of the measures that we take, by standing by the side of the people and of the regions that are affected, and by strengthening the economy, by strengthening the competitiveness of our economy. You are proposing an ambitious and a realistic approach. I think it's the correct one and I support it. Secondly, you are proposing a convergence instrument for the euro area. This is needed, but my kind request to you would be to open this instrument also to countries which are not yet in the euro area but which are preparing to join, to allow countries that are preparing to join the euro area to contribute to this instrument, to benefit from it and to be part of the decision making. This would enable their accession to the euro area, it would strengthen the European economy and it would also improve unity throughout the European Union. And thirdly, as a Romanian member of the European Parliament, I would like to say one word, and this is Schengen. Bulgaria and Romania have been fulfilling the conditions for joining the Schengen area since 2011, and we, the European Parliament, have demanded this several times. I would kindly request you that you stand by the side of the Parliament and that together with us you use the tools that you have at your disposal to enable Bulgaria and Romania's accession to the Schengen area. This is the one topic that the citizens of Bulgaria and Romania are expecting most from the European Union. It will improve the security of the Schengen area. It will not dilute it. And to conclude, I would just like to say, dear colleagues, we are a diverse Parliament. We are different. We are not the same. But through what I saw today from the President-designate in her guidelines and in her speech, I think she took all of our positions into account, and this is why I say she deserves the support of the Parliament today. Thank you very much.
Grazie. Onorevole Zorrinho.
Thank you, Mr. Zorrinho. Carlos, 1 minute.
Madam von der Leyen, the European Parliament directly represents citizens. As a Portuguese socialist, I represent voters who want a progressive agenda for the EU's future. When you participated in an exchange of views with the S&D group, I had major misgivings as to whether your degree of commitment was compatible with what my colleagues in the Portuguese delegation and I have promised our voters. But your written responses to those questions, which the group asked, and your statement today have been more convincing. For this reason, we're in a position to move on to the next stage. Let's get down to specifics. On the specifics, I have three questions. What support can we expect from you in defending an ambitious MFF which is pro-convergence, pro-cohesion and gives answers for the integrated development of our territories? What incentives will you provide for reforming the euro area and creating a robust EU budget which will protect the EU against future systemic crises? How will you turn the positive commitments you've entered into specific policies which will re-engage citizens with the European project, the marvellous European project? Ms von der Leyen, it's time for action.
Grazie. Onorevole in 't Veld.
Thank you. Ms in 't Veld. Sophia, 1 minute.
Dear Mrs von der Leyen, I am fully convinced of your qualities. I'm over here, in the middle. In the middle. I'm the red dot in the middle, yes. So, I'm fully convinced of your qualities, but the question is, are you not just the right person, but the right person for this job? And there I am not yet fully convinced. Firstly, your proposal for a rule of law mechanism, in my view, is insufficient, it is weak and too narrow in scope, and I also happen to know that it's actually a proposal of Mr. Timmermans that's supposed to be proposed this week, and I had a sneak peek at the leaked version of that. Secondly, I would like to hear you say something about how you are going to fight racism and xenophobia, which is a big problem in the European Union of today. And thirdly, I'm not so concerned about the right policies because I endorse the proposals that you've made. But the
enforcement of those policies, because in the European Union we're very good at making rules, we're extremely bad at enforcing them. I'm talking about Dieselgate, data protection scandals of Facebook, money laundering, I mean, need I spell it out, rule of law and fundamental rights violations in Hungary and Poland and elsewhere. Now, previous commissions have been very timid, and for me the key question is, you are very much the candidate of the member states because of the procedure that was followed. Now, are you going to be, like previous commissions, the lapdog of those member states, or are you going to be the pit bull that I would like you to be? That's what I need to hear.
Grazie. Onorevole
Thank you, Ms. Edstadler, please. 1 minute 30.
Vielen Dank.
Thank you, President. Dear Madam Designate Commissioner, colleagues, today this is a historic moment because it's going to lay the path for the next 5 years and lay the route. And the election showed us that the citizens are more interested in the EU now. However, they also expect us to come up with solutions. They expect guarantees for their prosperity and freedom and security. And they want a Europe that protects. And that is what the Austrian presidency used as its slogan. We're the strongest and we want to be able to shape the process. This nomination process can be criticised quite rightly, and that means that citizens have less confidence in it. But you need to separate the people who are being nominated from that process. And now it's about the trust of the citizens and getting that back again very quickly. We need to look to the future. We need a European Union that can work. There are deficits that need to be overcome. And I'd like to take you at your word. You were talking about the Spitzen candidate process, and you want to anchor that in the future because citizens need to be kept on board. We need to show them that the decisions taken at European level here can be done transparently. We need missions for Europe. We need personalities, people who are ready to take up those responsibilities, who are prepared to be proactive and to implement all of this. And with you, we have someone at the head of the Commission who is able to implement things. And that's what you were convincing us of today. And I think you've convinced many colleagues today. And so that's why you have our full support. And I can say that I think you are going to identify the right topics. They will be the right ones at the heart of the debate and ones that have not been looked at before. For example, gender violence against women. And these are issues that we're going to support you fully on in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Schieder, 1 minute. Please stick to the time.
Thank you very much. Thank you, President. Mrs. von der Leyen, I was very critical about your nomination, but I have to acknowledge that today you held a very good speech before the House with a lot of good content, important content. But let's be honest, hand on heart. Europe has heard a lot of good speeches, and what we're actually interested in is specific projects. For instance, tax fairness, tax justice in Europe, avoiding tax evasion, whether it's legal or illegal, that we put a stop to it. We also need to have genuine measures in order to protect the climate. We also need to make sure that these social aspects become reality in Europe, are implemented, and that is precisely the stumbling block. Implementation in Europe. It often fails. It fails very often because of the member states, and many of them are, under conservative governments as member states, and they are, of course, part of the family of the European People's Party as political groups. So this particular decision, is it the right one for Europe? Last but not least, of course, when it comes to the rule of law and fundamental rights, on that point, it's particularly important for me not just to pay lip service to this, but really to guarantee, and that you will guarantee, were you to be elected President of the Commission, that you make sure that Orban, Salvini, that Europe will not yield to them in future either. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Goerens, 1 minute. Thank you, President. Ms. von der Leyen, look at the challenges ahead of us. I despair when I look at the potential that the EU has, it brings some consolation. Since Barack Obama left office, the free world is rudderless. Multilateralism is in crisis. Someone needs to step in. Who will it be? Europe is the answer. We need to ensure that we all put our shoulders to the wheel in Europe to overcome the north-south and east-west divides. There are existential planetary threats, climate being top of the list. And this means we need China, India, the Middle East to work together, because otherwise decarbonising the planet's economy will be impossible. So we need to have the courage to go forward. If you're elected, and if you're successful, and I hope you will be, then you'll get no thanks during your term of office. If, however, unfortunately you fail, and I very much hope you won't, then you and we all will be cursed. And that's the responsibility we have ahead of us. Thank you, Ms. Maydell. 1 minute 30.
Designate. We need to make sure that Europe reaches to each and every European. Europe is not simply and just Brussels or Strasbourg. Europe is each and every one of us. Europe must not be more for some and less for others. We need to make sure that Europe reaches to every village, town, boy, girl, student, professional, every citizen through a well-thought MFF and initiatives. No European should leave their region due to an economic reason. Rules should apply to all. When countries such as Bulgaria fulfil the Schengen criteria, they should indeed be part of it. So will you engage with member states in the Council that find it difficult to recognise that this criteria is fulfilled? On Eurozone, in order not to be seen as a club for some, if countries fulfil the criteria, do you foresee the enlargement of the Eurozone in the next 5 years? And also, every business, every entrepreneur, every SME has problems employing the prepared and skilled professionals. Shouldn't we be a little bit more ambitious and have decisive actions in upskilling our people? After today, it will be very important that we implement the talk, and I'm ready to walk alongside you in delivering for a stable energy market, forward-looking and modernising industry, one that embraces technology and innovation in order to make sure that our continent is even more competitive. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Schaldemose, 1 minute.
Thank you very much, President. Thank you for your address, Mrs. von der Leyen, and thank you also for listening to our demands from the Socialists and Democrats group. Climate policy, CO2 reductions 50% by 2030, that's good. Now, if we want to attain this particular target, then we of course need to make sure that we as member states act. In the Nordic countries, we have 3 Socialist and Democrat governments. We are prepared to forge ahead. In Denmark, we now have a new government, and we're talking about, in fact, the same reduction, well, in fact, 70% reduction by 2030. So we are forging ahead. I very much hope that we'll have an opportunity to act on all of this. We need to make sure that we ban diesel cars, diesel vehicles. That would be one important step. We need to take these measures. We need to be effective. We need to be ambitious in terms of our policies. And the European Union started off as a coal and steel community. I very much hope, Mrs. von der Leyen, that you will be there in order to head a European Union where we become a climate union. And if you've achieved that, then you will have my support, madam. Thank you.
Grazie. Thank you. Ms. Gammon, 1 minute.
Mrs. von der Leyen, I really hope that you will succeed. I'm not convinced today, but I wish to be convinced by the end of your mandate. If we want to tackle climate change, if we want to define the digital age by European standards, we need to stop disappointing people by always just enforcing the lowest common denominator. We need to surprise them with our ambition, and we need to surprise them by supporting the biggest common goal, the biggest common vision that we all have. And I agree with many of the points that you raised today, but we all know that the main hurdle to tackle them does not lie here, and also not in the Commission, but most likely in the Council. And the Council does seem to be the one institution that comes out of this entire ordeal strengthened. And I do worry about that. I do worry that we are not talk about the topics and to go there to really reform the European Union and to go where it hurts. Because I do think that we need to change this. And this was the vote that the people made in May to really reform and renew the European Union so that it works better. And I do think that it needs to work better for its citizens. And we need to reform and renew the European Union, because otherwise all the important visions that you laid out today will not manifest, and I do not think that we have the time for that. Thank you.
Grazie. Mr. Corbett, 1 minute.
Thank you. Let me say that the comments about democracy made from the now empty benches at the back over there lead me to point out that you, Mrs. von der Leyen, will only take office if approved by a majority in this Parliament, whereas next week in Britain, a new Prime Minister will take office without the need for any affirmative vote in Parliament. A shocking contrast. But will you get a majority? You are asking this Parliament, after all, to back down from one of its principles, the Spitzenkandidat, to which it was strongly attached. So you have had to make serious concessions, movements to what we in this Parliament demand. And you have made a number. What you said on policy is significant. What you said on a right of legislative initiative is important. And may I add that what you said on Brexit is important, that you accept the need for a deadline extension for good reasons. Well, let me tell you, there is a good reason. And that reason is that the British public is changing its mind on Brexit. A majority of people elected to this Parliament recently are against Brexit. Opinion polls are moving. Every opposition party in the House of Commons now, every single one of them wants a new referendum. Keep that door open. Thank you very much.
Grazie.
Thank you. Our final speaker, Mr. Marques. Petra, 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mrs. von der Leyen, your commitment, oral and written, to more competitiveness, to a sustainable and solidary Europe shows that you saw correctly through our programme, but you also saw through the expectations of the European. Europe is in need of urgent action. So it was good to see that you didn't hesitate in assuming commitments that go towards what citizens expect, which is clear commitment, clear achievements. We now expect due capacity to compromise and to overcome the blockages from the Council on several issues. On decarbonisation, on migration, on Eurozone reform, on the pillar of social rights, there's no room for hesitation. Huge challenges lie immediately on our hands, such as the approval of an adequate budget for Europe. We take your words today and your written words with great expectation. The European Parliament will deliver on its part. The citizens of the EU expect nothing less from us. That means that your pledge on this day is a solemn one. Europeans demand nothing less than 5 years of redemption of the European project after 10 years of crisis and hesitation. Let us rebuild from now on the Europe of our dreams. Thank you.
Grazie.
Thank you. So that was our final speaker, and we shall now give Ms von der Leyen the chance to respond. You have the floor, madam.
Mr. President, honourable members, thank you very much for this lively discussion. And it was constructive, it was controversial, and if there's any proof needed that democracy in Europe is alive and kicking, you brought that proof in this Parliament today, and I thank you for that. Indeed, it has been mentioned many, many times that we had only 2 weeks to get to know each other. I'm here. It is a great honour for me to have had the opportunity to present the programme. Of course, we know that a speech is just a speech, it's limited, but I think you have had today in your offices the guidelines that I laid out to all of us, so written down our details on the topics: a climate neutral Europe in 2050, a more social and competitive Europe, a Europe that makes use of its full potential, a Europe that has a new push on European democracy, and a strong Europe that protects our European way of life. I am aware, when I listen to you and many arguments, that there is a feeling of a division between Central, East Europe and West Europe. We have to overcome that division. I'm full of respect when I think of the effort the Central European and the Eastern European countries undertook and undertake to join the European Union, to join Schengen, to join the Eurozone, and I think when they meet the criteria, this has to be rewarded. And I'm aware of the fact there is still a certain division between South and North. I think I've extensively elaborated about how we could overcome that, how we find the right balance between responsibility and flexibility, investment and growth that is needed, and where we will work together. I want to involve and get in touch closer with this European Parliament. And that's why I support the right of initiative. That's why I believe we need to find sound ways to anchor the Spitzenkandidat system. I'm convinced we're able to do that. I want to build new trust. I want to build partnership between the European Commission and the European Parliament. I am your natural ally, if I may put it that way. And at the very end, before we're going to go in the vote tonight, let me end perhaps with a saying that comes once again from a Greek statesman. He was one of the founders of democracy, and I think it's a wonderful motto for our common work. It says, "The secret to happiness is freedom. The secret to freedom is courage." Let's have courage together. Let's be courageous on the European Union. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Grazie.
Thank you very much, Ms von der Leyen. The session stands adjourned. The vote is planned for 6 p.m. today, and we now adjourn until 3 p.m. Thank you very much.
This is the secondary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the secondary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the secondary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the secondary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the secondary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the secondary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the secondary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the secondary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the secondary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the secondary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the secondary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the secondary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the secondary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the secondary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the secondary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the secondary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the secondary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the secondary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the secondary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the secondary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the secondary audio circuit for the Reuters live service. This is the secondary audio circuit for